Everybody, and welcome to the City Commission December 7th, 2021 evening meeting. Thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate all of you who are in attendance, and for those of you who are here for the first time, welcome, and thank you for coming. There's a certain format that we follow in the meeting tonight. We start with our Pledge of Allegiance and do the roll call, make some special announcements, and then we have presentations. Tonight we have just one presentation, and mainly it's to recognize individuals, organizations, or events that take place in our community. Let me begin by first saying that our City Commission meetings are going to be hosted in person, and any additional information you would like with regard to participating in our meeting, please go to www.fortlauderdale.gov/City Commission meetings. I'll repeat that, www.fortlauderdale.gov/City Commission meetings. Now, to help ensure decorum, we ask that you please abide by the following guidelines. 1, please refrain from any behavior that is disruptive, distractive, profane, or in any way inhibits this meeting in any way. And secondly, if you wish to speak on a specific agenda item, please sign up at the back of the City Hall lobby. A member of the City Clerk's office staff will be there to assist. So, can I please invite you all to stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Great. Thank you all. So, Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Vice Mayor Moritas.
Here.
Commissioner Glassman.
Here.
Commissioner McKenzie.
He's not here yet.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Here.
Mayor Trentels.
Here. There are no agenda announcements. We have, we need the approval of the minutes and the agenda. May I please have a motion for approval of the minutes and the agenda?
Mayor, I have one edit, one amendment.
Of course you
A meeting would be remiss if we did not hear from you on the minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Please, what I has not been dotted or T crossed?
Well, it's actually something a little bit different. I'm looking at the meeting minutes of Thursday, October 21 at 6 p.m., the regular meeting. And on page 21, that speaker is actually Paula Yukna, U-N-K-A, not the vegetable yucca, but it's Yunka.
Okay.
Y-U-K-N-A is her name.
I'm sure she'd appreciate that.
She does. I already told her.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I can
hear a
move.
motion to approve the agenda and the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved.
Second.
I hear a second. It's moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor
Too
Moritas.
fast for you, Jeff? I'm sorry.
Yes. Vice Mayor Moritas.
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman.
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie. Commissioner Sorensen.
Yes.
Mayor Trentels.
Yes, and the minutes and the agenda are now approved. So tonight I have the honor and the privilege of making the presentation tonight, and in doing so, I'd like to invite Rita Case to the podium.
Oh, boy.
You okay?
Office is cold.
Hot too.
So tonight, we have a proclamation from the Office of the Mayor of the City of Fort Lauderdale. The City of Fort Lauderdale recognizes the 39th annual, 39 years you've been doing it. 39th annual Rick Case Bikes for Kids program, December 2nd, 2021. Whereas the Rick Case Bikes for Kids program was initiated in 1982 by Rita and Rick Case and the Rick Case Automotive Group in Ohio. And whereas the Rick Case Bikes for Kids program works in conjunction with the Boys and Girls Clubs, local charities, churches, and schools to collect donated bicycles and share them with deserving children in time for the holidays. And hundreds of bicycles were distributed to children last year, and more than 125,000 bikes have been provided since 1982. And whereas Rick K's Bikes for Kids program is collecting bikes for the 2021 holiday season through December 2021, with a goal set this year for 6,500 bicycles. In the spirit of giving, we encourage everyone to participate by donating unused bicycles and helping to spread the word so that others may join the program and come together to make children's holiday wishes come true. And finally, the recipients are delighted children whose holiday is lifted by the generous benevolence of the community and all those involved in the Rick Case for Bikes Kids program. Now, therefore, we, as City Commissioners of the City of Fort Lauderdale, do hereby proclaim today, December 7th, 2021, as Rick Case Bikes for Kids Day in the City of Fort Lauderdale, and encourage all citizens to join us in commending the Case family, Rita Case in particular, as well as those who make this outstanding program possible for their dedication to bringing happiness to so many children during the holiday season. Signed and dated by myself, December 7th, 2021. Congratulations, and thank you so much. Would you like to say a few words?
First, show how clever this is. Little bicycle on the bottom. Oh, nice. Thank you. Yeah, Rick and I started this back in Ohio. We had 14 bicycle stores in Ohio in the 70s and 80s, and all these people would come in every year and buy a new bicycle for their kids, and we kept saying, what happened to your old bike? Oh, it's in the garage, it's in the garage. So in 1982, we decided to ask them to bring their bikes in that they were no longer going to use, and we would pass them out to Boys and Girls Club kids in Ohio. That's how it got started, and since then, we're now in Atlanta, as you know, and down here with 9 locations here in Broward County. So we asked the community to bring in a bike that they no longer use, that could be used, and we will match it up to a child that wouldn't have the opportunity to have that freedom of their first bike, as we all remember our first bicycle. So Rick and I were very passionate about this, and even though Rick's not here with me, which is odd, but yes, so thank you everybody very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you just recently say?
Okay, so at this point, I ask any member of the commission if they have an item on the consent agenda which they would like to pull and discuss and vote on separately. If there are no consent agenda items pulled, we will then vote on them all at once. If there's an item here that you've come to speak on that's on the consent agenda that has not been pulled, then I would invite you to speak at the beginning of our vote, before we vote, on that particular item, and then we will make a decision whether or not to go forward. So I have a number of people who have signed up to speak on consent agenda items, so let's see what the commission wants to do, and then we'll go forward.
Mayor,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. Before we go to consent, could I just take a moment just to acknowledge a memorial service for our homeless that I just wanted to kind of mention?
Please go ahead.
For a moment. Ryan has a, do you want to hold up that Ryan? Maybe, so Mayor, this is happening right now. It's, it's the annual just memorial event to recognize all of the homeless in the county who died this past year. And so right now there's a memorial.
Homeless people died this past year.
105 in the county. Yeah. So it just is meant to recognize those who died, and just our ongoing efforts as a city and county and nation to help our homeless. And
Well, why don't we share a moment of silence with regard to that?
That'd be great. Yeah, thanks, Mayor.
Have a moment in silence in recognition of the homeless individuals who have died this year. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Ryan.
Okay, let us return to the consent agenda. Vice Mayor, do you have any items you'd like to pull?
Yes, CR9.
CR9,
Yes.
okay, Commissioner McKenzie? Okay, Commissioner Glassman?
Thank you, Mayor. CM1 and CR7.
Okay, and
None, thank you.
none. So the consent agenda items that have been asked to be pulled are CR9, CM1, and CR7. There are people who have signed up to speak on CR1, CR2, CR3, and CM2, none of which have been pulled tonight. So those individuals, I can call your names if you'd like to speak now on those items. I'll start with Kat Thomas, CM2. Kat, are you here? Kat, didn't you just sign up? Okay.
Looking at those items, Mayor, those might all be the applicants.
All right, so that's with regard to road closures for the events? Yeah, so that's the app.
That is, and CR 1, 2, and 3 are all dock permits.
Those are all applicants?
That's my guess, but we probably should confirm, but I believe
Yeah,
that
they're
would be
all the
right.
same person, Gina Robbins. So is Gina here? Did you want to speak? You're just here to support it. Okay, so we'll put those aside. All right, so let's take up, we'll take up CM1. CM1, which is motion approving event agreement for the Meds Brunch. Commissioner Glassman, you pulled that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I pulled it for a couple of reasons, and I guess if someone could help me with some of these questions. First of all, it is on the top of the Las Olas garage, and there have been some issues there in some of the events with the way the sound carries. If you look at the application, it actually says, I'm sorry, in the actual backup, it says amplified music, yes, but then it also says, if you look at the actual, I'm sorry, it says amplified music, no, but if you look at the application, it actually is going to have a live DJ. Also, this is an organization from outside of Fort Lauderdale, so I was wondering if we've ever talked about or considered different fee structures for residents versus non-residents in terms of events and utilizing city spaces. And it also says it's an event agreement for Meds Brunch, but the event goes from noon to 10 p.m., so that's a long brunch. So I just was trying to get a little bit more information because I'm just having concerns about the DJ, the sound, the day of the week, and also the amplified music and the length of time for the brunch and fee schedule for residents versus non-residents. So those are the questions.
So we can check and see if we've got either parks staff or the applicant present. We have never had a different or sliding scale for resident versus non-resident, so I can take the answer to that question. We've had different fees based upon when the application is submitted, but not differentiating based upon residency. Phil, I don't know, do you know the applicant, if they're here, they can speak to the event?
Brittany, are they here? So we asked them to be here, so they should be showing up. So, but to your point on the amplified music, Commissioner, if I'm reading this right, on the memo, they're not asking for exemption to the amplified music, but yes, there is amplified music up until 10 o'clock on Saturday. So maybe that was the confusion, was on the amplified music side of things and the extended amplified, but there will be music, but it's only till 10 o'clock, and that is allowed on a Saturday night.
Okay. And it's not just a brunch, though.
Sounds like it's a very late brunch, yes.
Well, it's a 10-hour brunch.
It's a
Yeah.
lunch,
It's a long buffet line.
Yeah.
brunchener, for chinner.
Sunday fun day.
Brunch.
Regener, that's a new term.
Nice, I like it. So I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, but should we actually ever talk about at some point in time a different fee structure for City of Fort Lauderdale?
Well, I'm not sure this is an autumn. It says the address of the organization for the applicants in Miramar, but I don't think people from Miramar are coming to this. It's an event for realtors, mortgage brokers, and community business owners. I think they're like people who function in the area. We don't know that necessarily, but I can tell you people from Miramar are not coming to Fort Lauderdale for a brunch.
I think
Okay,
so.
well, maybe then even if the applicant is from the city versus the applicant not being from the city, does it matter? I don't know.
Well, I think it's a subject we can discuss at.
Yeah, at some point in time, because I do think that city residents or applicants from the city or city businesses should have a different fee structure than not, especially if we're utilizing, I mean, I think it's a great deal. You come and you have that whole beautiful event space on the top of the Las Olas garage, and you pay just $200. That's a good deal, isn't it?
$200.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that date's already booked, I'm sorry.
We'll be there.
That's booked too.
After party?
Okay,
Thank
okay,
you.
let's move on. Okay.
Through that.
Okay. So I just thought we should have that discussion at some point in
That
time.
discussion.
Okay, and then Phil, can you tell us anything else about the applicant? Have they had events here before? Any issues?
So, looks like he may have just walked in the room, so
Okay.
I can speak to that.
Any further questions?
No, I think he's bringing the applicant up.
Yes, he
Oh,
just
there
walked
we
in the
go.
room.
Yes. How you doing?
Well, how are you?
Excellent, thank you. Thank you for being here. So tell us a little bit about the event and who's producing it and why.
It's a brunch. I'm a mortgage broker, so every year, the first year, I have a brunch for all the realtors, all of my affiliates, all of the title agents. So it's really for just, I know it says till 10. It's actually till 8 p.m. Because till 10 will be more of a cocktail hour. And it's nothing particular, it's just having food being catered and having drinks. But it's nothing, I kept eventing the rooftop before. So I know the decimals have to be pretty low. I know the noise ordinance is, I kept numerous events in the rooftop. So I know all the guidelines as far as how loud and how late can we go. So it's not my first time.
But the event starts at noon.
Yeah, it starts at noon.
Okay, and you said it'll go till 8, not 10?
No, yeah, it's going to 8, not 10.
Okay.
Cocktails at 10.
Well, you
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
cocktails. Is there a second party?
Yeah, there's a second part basically on the food ends around 8 and then the cocktail will go to like 9, not even 10. I said 10 just to give me a little room, but it's really till 9.
Okay, but the event actually will go to 10.
No, 9.
Okay,
9 to be exact.
9.
Yes, 9
Have
p.m.
time to wind down.
Okay, so it'll go till 9.
We'll go to 9.
Okay, and this is for realtors, mortgage brokers, community business owners from where? From where?
I'm with Innovative Mortgage. My branch is in Hollywood, so I'm a broker, so I do business with just around the whole state of Florida.
Okay, so the Miramar address is actually who?
That's my personal address.
Oh, the Miramar address is your address?
Yes, my address.
I gotcha. Okay, how many, I'm trying to think, you estimated a couple hundred people, I think 200?
Yeah, about 200 people, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Again, I would just say, Chris, I don't know, I just get some complaints about the noise traveling at night over the water. Folks not just that live on the beach, but also across the intracoastal. So we just need to be, I think, cognizant of it and just aware. Thank you for that. I'm okay. I'll move the item, Mayor.
Would you like to introduce the item?
Sure, I move it.
The CM 1 has been moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Please call the roll on CM 1.
Vice Mayor Moritas,
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman,
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie,
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Yes.
Mayor Trentals.
Yes, and CM 1 is approved. CR 7. That's Commissioner Glassman again.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We had a little bit of this discussion this afternoon during the CRA meeting, but if you look at CR7, letter M, that looks like it's the same item pretty much connected to what we talked about today, where we're going to forego the Central Beach wayfinding signage program information center so that we can move forward quickly with the items that we need to do for the aquatics complex.
Right.
So again, I just want to ask, I guess we were waiting this afternoon, maybe Tom Green is
Tom
here. Yeah, so Tom, I just need to find out more about, the Central Beach wayfinding and signage has been an issue that people have been waiting for to happen on the Central Beach for at least 5 years now, I think, right? 2016, I think this was in the CIP, and every year it gets carried over. So just wondering where we are with the wayfinding and information signage project.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor Commissioners. Tom Green, Project Manager for CRA and also for Parks and Rec. Regarding the wayfinding signage, that project dates back to 2013. And is a project originally, the intent and purpose for it is to brand and identify a unique wayfinding area for the beach. So the project was initially managed by the CRA, then managed by a different department, and now fell back to the CRA to kind of carry it through. At the time that the project was brought back to the CRA, the only funding source remaining within that project was CRA dollars. So for a wayfinding signage program to kind of brand the beach, the concept and design plans developed kind of encompassed from down to 17th Street north to Sunrise Boulevard. But with the CRA, we have a funding restriction that I can only use those dollars for a defined geographic boundary, which is from the entrance to the South Beach parking lot north to Alhambra. So while there is money in there, it was mainly CRA dollars that could then pay for the implementation of it, but I cannot necessarily brand the entire beach. So without additional funding source there, I could not accomplish the project, which is to brand and identify the entire beach area.
Well, let me ask you a question, because if I go back to the afternoon, I do believe if you go back at least 5 years in the CIP program, there were also funds identified from parking.
From parking, that's correct.
Yes.
So we were looking at about 400-something thousand from CRA and about 400,000 from parking. So what happened to the $400,000 from parking?
It's still available.
That's still available. And then, so how much is still available for the CRA portion?
Well, if you allow these dollars to be transferred so that we can move forward with the chlorine production, then I've worked with, or had a first conversation with our budget director earlier tonight. Tom was going to get me a number as to what the project, total project cost is, because it's all the way through design. So we have a project that is essentially implementable. Probably needs some tweaking because it's got a little bit of age to it, but we're certainly not starting from scratch. I just need to know what that number is so that then I can bring back a recommendation and close the funding gap between what the number is and what dollars are available in the parking fund. Parking finished the year strong, and so I don't have any concern with the parking fund being able to make its contribution. I just need to know what other dollar figure I'm looking for. And I don't have that yet, but I just asked the question earlier tonight.
You said are you saying that we're already designed, this is already there in terms of design, ready to go?
Yeah, Tom can speak to how far the project and sort of what stage it's in.
So concept and detailed design, I mean, there'll be minor effort to kind of pick back up the ball and kind of get it through all the way through construction documents or CDs, but essentially the concept is done, design is essentially done for the wayfinding.
Okay, well,
We probably should bring it back to the commission and test it just to make sure that it still
yes,
is in keeping with what this commission would want, because it does, again, have a couple years on it. And
right. And I don't think we've seen
Changed
it.
out
We've
there.
never discussed it as a commission. And if, as Tom says, this has been kicking around since 2013, and I think the CIP money has definitely been there since at least 2016. So it's a while, and I think folks on the beach really have been looking forward to some sort of cohesive signage So it's not just, so willy-nilly and all over the place and.
I still get lost out there.
Excuse me?
I said I still get lost out there.
Well, there you go. But so I think it's a great project, and I remember there was a lot of enthusiasm years ago for it. So I would appreciate it if we could.
So why don't we schedule it for conference? I'll bring it back and let you all see it.
Great.
And at that time, I'll have a funding recommendation.
I think that'll be excellent. Okay, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And by the way, Tom, while you're there, how are we doing with the A1A Streetscape project?
Well, that's a separate subject.
Okay, never mind. So the mayor doesn't want me to talk about
So,
that now.
Mr.
Okay.
Commissioner, would you like to introduce the resolution?
Yes, I will, and Tom, we'll talk about that some other time.
You have an email that's responsive to the A1A question you just asked.
Excellent.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. I'm able to move the item. Thank you, Mayor.
So CR7 is introduced. Please call the roll.
A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, amending the City of Fort Lauderdale's final revised FY 2022 all funds budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021 and ending September 30, 2022 by appropriating and transferring funds as set forth in City Commission Agenda Memo number 21-0928, amending the City of Fort Lauderdale's final FY 2022 to FY 2026 Community Investment Plan for the fiscal years beginning October 1, 2021 and ending September 30, 2026 by appropriating and transferring funds as set forth in the City Commission Agenda Memo number 21-928, abandoning the Central Beach Wayfinding and Information Signage Project and providing for severability and an effective date. Vice Mayor Moritas,
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman,
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie,
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen,
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis.
Yes, and the resolution is approved. CR9, Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I pulled CR9 just to get a little bit more clarification or input from the commission also. I'm excited that we have this program with the Museum of Discovery and Science for the 19 public schools listed. Well, they might not be in the backup, but there are 19 public schools that will receive this opportunity. I just wanted to know what you all thought about the possibility of adding some of our private schools to this opportunity. We are using taxpayer dollars for this program. It's general fund revenue, and many of our taxpayers send their children to private schools. I have 4 large private schools in my district that would also enjoy the opportunity.
So this is just to confirm an allocation that we had already identified for the Museum of Science. Is this correct?
We went through the building process. This was one of the nonprofits that made application that was approved in the budget.
Wait a minute, I can't hear.
Sorry. This was one of those that was approved in the budget, but the act of approving the budget didn't approve the grant with the Museum of Discovery and Science. That's what this action is.
Right. So, Vice Mayor, what are you asking now?
Well, these are the details. So when we approved the approximately $200,000, the exact amount, we didn't really have the details of what we would be spending the money on. So now we have the details. So now we're discussing it. So when I looked at this, I did notice that it was only funding the public schools in our city. And, some of the children that do attend even our public schools are not residents of our city either. I know even VSY is a magnet school. So not every child that attends there is really a City of Fort Lauderdale resident. So I'm just asking if we can add some of the private schools to also receive the same opportunity.
Cox, do you want to come up here? Where are you?
And
We have Joe Cox here, who's
I don't want to take away, I'm actually thinking about adding to, but I'd also like us to think possibly in the future, if we are funding a program for elementary children within our city, to also think about how we can include all the elementary children, the private and public schools as well, when we move forward with other projects in the future.
Joe Cox, Museum of Discovery and Science. Thank you for the conversation.
Do you have any thoughts with regard to, well, let me rephrase that. Do you have a program, or do any of your programs include the participation of private school students as well as public school students?
So when we wrote the grant, we did include the 19 public schools in the grant application. Would certainly be happy to extend it to private schools as well. We currently have lots of programs that we offer to both public and private schools.
That we would need more money
Say it again?
I said we would need more money to, if we chose to move forward with the private schools, it would be an additional appropriation.
Can you,
Or we could ask Joe to be creative with the
Yeah,
dollars allocated.
I think you can be creative with that $214,800 and maybe include some private school students in some of these gatherings.
So the way the grant was structured, we have built the program so that each public school student has 4 experiences. They have 2 visits to the museum and then 2 visits to the school by the museum. The program was structured to start with the school year, so we do have a lot of the public schools who have already signed up for the 4 programs, so it would mean going back to the schools and reducing what we're offering the public schools.
You can't just add more participants?
So we could add more participants. The cost to add for private schools would be significantly less than the cost to add for public schools because a lot of them have their own transportation, and about half of this cost is transportation. So we'd be happy to come up with what a cost per student would be to add private schools in.
Mayor, I have an issue with this, and I'll tell you why. This is a grant application that was submitted by the Museum of Discovery and Science. When was this submitted, this grant application?
A year ago almost?
A year ago. So when you submit a grant application for anything, you have to be very detailed in your specific scope, exactly who's being served, why. I think this is about $66 per student, if my math is correct. So everything is very spelled out. I think it's way too late to tinker with this grant application, change the scope, change everything, ask Joe to go back and change it. But I think these are good questions for us to consider going forward next year. But I'm just not in favor of, at this late date, actually going back in and changing it and having to inform the 19 schools. And it just doesn't seem to me the way to go about doing this kind of business, that's all.
So let us just conclude then, to the extent that the museum could find space and sufficient funds to include one or more of these private schools that serve as second and fourth graders, you would be amenable to that.
Yeah, we're certainly happy to look at that. And, moving forward into the next cycle, we'd love to include every child.
I'm surprised Broward County Public Schools can't cover some of the transportation costs. Is that just how it works with their field trips? I mean, I know obviously somebody has to pay.
Broward County, the museum typically fundraises for a lot of programming for Broward County Public Schools. They typically only have $2,500 per school allocated in their budget. Anything above that, we have to fundraise for at the museum to bring public school students to the museum.
And you always include transportation in that fundraising?
Usually, if there's Title I schools, and so many of our schools are, we try to raise the funds for transportation as well.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't catch the specifics of the backup when this was submitted a year ago. We did have, I think, over 100 different applicants apply for our nonprofit funding. I just think, philosophically, we do have a lot of private school students as well, and I know there are opportunities, or these are opportunities they'd like to participate in also, even if it was twice as opposed to 4 times. So I'm obviously disappointed with the decision, and I hope in the future when we get these, and Chris, if we get some nonprofit stuff related to education in the future, if you could just try to help flag just the schools and students involved so we can be equitable.
Joe, how do you decide on the 19 schools?
So we looked at the 19 public elementary schools in the city of Fort Lauderdale. So we included all of the elementary schools in the city.
Okay, and
Public schools.
do you have any programs that the private schools in Fort Lauderdale take advantage of?
We do, lots. We see, over 90,000 school children come to the museum every year. Many of them are underwritten by grants from the city, from other corporate partners, from philanthropists, and a lot of the private schools build field trip money into their budget, so they do have access and they pay for the school.
So they are able to take advantage
Of course,
of
absolutely.
the programs.
Right.
Okay. Do you have any involvement at all with, I know, for instance, the Broward Center for the Performing Arts has the SEAS program, Student Enrichment in the Arts and Sciences. Are you part of that at all?
So SEAS is dedicated to the Broward Center. There's a separate program, which is the Supplemental Art and Science, which is the $2,500 per school. And so we worked with Broward County Public Schools. They've now got a website, actually, where you can go and see all of the different opportunities, including mods.
Okay, that's great. So thank you for doing these programs. I think they're really important for the schools. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
And as we look at this in the future, I just wanted to note, and I mentioned it to the city manager, but if we also go to private schools, we need to be careful that it's inclusive of either all private schools, or we have to be careful how we select, because some of them are parochial, some of them are religious. So we have to be careful who we choose, who we not choose. So it would preferably be all-inclusive, and I don't know what kind of numbers we'd be looking at, but we just have to keep that in mind as well, because it's public money.
Okay. Would someone like to introduce the resolution?
Introduced.
A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, approving a City of Fort Lauderdale FY 2022 not-for-profit grant participation agreement with the Museum of Discovery and Science, Inc., authorizing the execution of the not-for-profit grant participation agreement and providing for severability and an effective date. Vice Mayor Moritas?
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman?
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis?
Yes, and the resolution is approved. Do I hear a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda items?
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Moritas?
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman?
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis?
Yes, and all those consent agenda items are now approved. If anyone's here on a consent agenda item, your item has been approved. You're welcome to stay and participate and listen to the rest of the meeting, or if you have other things to do,
So disappointed when they walk out.
already. What's that?
Disappointing when they walk out.
Yeah. Okay, R1, appointment of board and committee members. Mr.
Mayor,
would you like to read the names?
Mayor, before I begin with R1, I just need to make an announcement on the agenda. So when I published the agenda, I had to make a last-minute change to move R2 to PH2. So you won't see an R2 on the agenda tonight, but unfortunately, I printed the agenda for the public walking in today to sign up on. I approved the agenda. I printed the agenda before I made the change. So that said, anyone that signed up for R2 is really signing up tonight for PH2.
No one has signed up for either.
Okay, so you don't have any R2.
I have nothing.
You're really smart.
All right.
Oh, Wendy has them.
Oh, well,
She's fixing
am I
it
going
for
to
us.
see them? Wendy, you holding out on me?
Procedure.
So anything that says R2 for those who came in tonight to sign up, they're really signed up for PH2.
Okay,
And
no
then
one signed up.
That also would have changed a couple other items in the order, but you have the correct cards.
Okay.
Our crack staff made those corrections to my misprint. So I just wanted to put that on the record for anyone that's out here. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do. Mayor, is it too late to reconsider the pay for performance raise for the city clerk?
He's leaving.
He's leaving.
I don't think.
But we could do it retroactively.
I think my last one was over a year ago.
Okay, thank you. I'm just checking. Thank you.
I just had to
I
do
think you
something.
voted no then, too.
I had
I
to
don't
do
remember.
something on one of my last meetings.
Fiscally conservative. Thank you,
Yes,
man.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
When is your last meeting, Jeff?
Tonight.
Tonight.
Right now. Should we walk them out, Mayor?
Fine. Sergeant at Arms, are you ready?
Yeah.
Escort
Remove
the
the city clerk, please. Is
Okay.
it, seriously though, is the next meeting
No.
January? You gonna be here?
January.
You'll be here January. Okay.
Can I ask a question? Why is our screen a blank screen?
It's like yellow. It's kind of
You gotta
annoying.
click.
That one's
click
not
your
my
button.
fault.
Everybody else is yellow?
Click the TV.
Which button is that?
Yeah, that one's blank.
And you gotta go to this.
Ours is orange too.
Here's the orange. Yeah, it's kind of like, there we go.
They're both blank screens.
All right.
Oh,
There we go.
Yep. Yes. My hair looks.
There you go. That's a beautiful face.
I just want to see myself, I guess. Okay.
Okay, so for R1,
For R1, please read the names.
okay, for the next meeting, for a reinstatement for Cemetery System Board of Trustees, Richard Kurtz, and that's Commissioner McKenzie's appointment. I also wanted to just remind you, and Sarah Spurlock's here if you have any questions, that she's going to be having her meeting for the Walk of Fame, and we provided you the names of those who were willing to serve on that committee, so if you can look at those. For tonight's resolution, Aviation Advisory Board, Wes Smonik, and that's Mayor Trentalis. Cemetery System Board of Trustees, Pamela Beasley Pittman, and that's nominated by Commissioner McKenzie. Citizen Committee of Recognition, Romney Rogers. Consensus, nominated by Commissioner Sorensen. Citizen Police Review Board, Carol Lee Ortman, nominated by Vice Mayor Moritas. Community Appearance Board, Lorraine O'Neill, nominated by Commissioner Sorensen. Fire Rescue Facilities Bond Issue Blue Ribbon Committee, John Ratsinas, nominated by Mayor Trentalis. That was better, right? Close. International Swimming Hall of Fame, our Commissioner Glassman. Invest Fort Lauderdale Inc. Board of Directors, Chris Smith, nominated by Commissioner McKenzie. Noise Control Advisory Committee, Ralph Stone, nominated by Commissioner Sorensen. Parks, Recs, and Beaches Board, Caleb Gunter, nominated by Mayor Trentalis. Sustainability Advisory Board, Kelly Charles, nominated by Commissioner Sorensen, and that rounds it out, Mayor.
Okay, would someone like to introduce the resolution?
Introduced.
Are there any additions or modifications that need to be made? There being none, please call the roll.
A resolution, the City Commission of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, appointing or nominating, if applicable, board and committee members as set forth in the exhibit attached hereto and made a part hereof. Vice Mayor Moritas,
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman,
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie,
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen,
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis.
Yes, and I would like to thank all those persons who have agreed to participate in these advisory boards. Thank you very much for your service, and thank you for your commitment to our city. Okay, moving on to PH1, the public hearing, quasi-judicial ordinance vacating a right-of-way identified as a 40-foot wide by 125-foot long portion of Northeast Fifth Terrace between north of Northeast 6th Street and south of Northeast 7th Street, Flagler 6th LLC. Anyone wishing to speak must be sworn in. The commission will announce any site visits, communications, or expert opinions received and make them a part of the record. Vice Mayor, do you have any disclosures?
I do. Hold on one second. This is PH1.
Yeah. Where's Mr. Shine? There you are.
This is Robert Lockery? Yes, and you're here for Robert, okay. So 8/31/21, I met with Robert Lockery and Charlie Ladd, and I think that's it. No, it's, yes, something like that. I'm done. Robert?
That it?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner McKenzie,
I can go now, Stephen. Thank
any
you.
disclosures?
No, I don't. Robert Lockery, but he wanted me to go out of turn. I was waiting on your acknowledgement, please.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Glassman?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Site visit also met with Robert Lockery and Charlie Ladd on September 15th, 2021.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Applicant and representative.
I also met with the applicant and their representatives, and with regard to this, no one signed up to speak except the representative for the owner. So is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this item? None being, could someone please move to close public hearing?
Second.
Moved and seconded, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Moritas,
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman,
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie,
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen,
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis.
Yes, public hearing is now closed. Would someone like to introduce the ordinance? It's been introduced.
An ordinance vacating a portion of Northeast Fifth Terrace, 40-foot right-of-way lying west of lots 32 through 36,
Block 313 and lying east of lots 13 through 17, Block 314, Progresso according to the plat thereof is recorded in Plat Book 2, page 18 of the Public Records of Dade County, Florida, located north of Northeast 6th Street, south of Northeast 7th Street, east of Northeast 5th Avenue, and west of Federal Highway. All said lands situate, lying, and being in the city of Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, Florida. Vice Mayor Moritas,
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman,
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie, Commissioner Sorensen.
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis.
Yes, and the ordinance is approved. Thank you, Mr. Shine. PH2, de novo hearing, consideration of a quasi-judicial resolution for site plan level 3 application, 808 Southeast 4th Residence. There's a request to defer to December 21st.
That is correct. Request by the applicant. I don't know who is here tonight representing the project, but we should probably have them.
Objection to that? Would you like to come up and speak, Ms. Bogdanoff?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Ellen Bogdanoff, representing the residents of Fourth. And I know that I was talking to the city attorney that said that it has to be within 60 days. I guess my question would be, do you have the capacity to waive that? A lot of the residents have already made their Christmas plans, and a lot of them will be out of town on the 21st, and we were hoping that we could do it to the first meeting in January, which I think is the 4th.
The problem with that is that we have a deadline of 60 days after the call-up provision is.
Right. I don't, can it be waived? I guess that would be a question for the city attorney.
Not by us.
It would have to be
I
waived
don't
by the
want, right, and it would have to be pretty unequivocal because we don't want that argument coming
Is there
up.
anyone here in the audience who is representing the applicant? Can you step forward, please? I can't, you have to come to the podium and speak. Please. Please identify yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Roya Edwards with toothaker.org representing the applicant. So last week...
Mayor, I'm not sure if, were you sworn in?
No, I wasn't, but I'm just here to say that we submitted a deferral letter last week to be scheduled for the December 21st hearing. That's all I'll say today.
I get that. Can you,
Doesn't sound like it.
do you have the authority to make any decisions with regard to waiving that 60-day rule?
I do not know.
Okay. So there we go. Well, what we can do is on the 21st, we can defer it again to the next meeting if they agree to. All right? All right. So there's a motion. Do we have to do it by motion to defer?
Yes.
Would someone like to make the motion?
Moved.
It's been moved and seconded to defer the de novo hearing on this item to December 21st, 2021. Any other questions? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Moritas,
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman,
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie, Commissioner Sorensen,
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis.
Yes. Now, Paul Burkhart, Marcia Sepelowitz, Leanne Duzer, Janice Texera, Doug McDaniel, Kathleen Haynes, and Sam Levin. Will you all be available on the 21st? You will? Okay. All the others that I mentioned, you'll all be available? Okay. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. But you'll be, okay. Okay. Okay, whatever it takes. Okay. I can't read lips.
Whatever it takes.
Yes, I heard you. I heard you.
3 times.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. PH3, quasi-judicial, it's a public hearing regarding a quasi-judicial resolution approving a historic landmark designation of the property commonly known as, quote, the New River Castle, end quote, located at 625 Southwest 5th Place in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Historic Preservation Board case number UDP HDP 21001. Anyone wishing to speak must be sworn in. The commission will announce any site visits, communications, or expert opinions received and make them a part of the record. Ms. Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. October 19th, 2021, I met with Greg. Greg, how do you say your last name? McAloon. I would have said it wrong. Greg McAloon from Trib Scott, along with Daniel Cole, the owner. 11/9/21, I met with Michaela from the Broward Trust for the Historic Preservation Society. And 12/1/21, I did a site visit with Daniel Cole, and I met with him.
Okay. Commissioner McKenzie. Can you speak into your microphone?
I spoke to the applicant.
Spoke with the applicant, okay? Commissioner Glassman.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I met with Greg McAloon and Daniel Cole on October 14th, 2021. I also have done numerous site visits. I had I had two telephone conversations with Michaela Conca from the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. And I don't know if this is part of a disclosure, but I did watch the Historic Preservation Board meeting. Thank you.
Okay. And Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you, Mayor.
Our district. Is this?
It's in my district, beautiful District 4.
Okay.
Yep. Site visit and multiple conversations and meetings with applicant and representative. Thanks.
Okay, I've met with the owner and the representative, as well as people in the neighborhood who've spoken with me and emailed me and texted me and phoned me, and I didn't have a chance to make a site visit. But anyway, so those are our disclosures. There are a number of people who signed up to speak. So is there a representative here from the Historic Preservation Board who'd like to make a presentation with regard to their recommendation to the City Commission? I believe I saw. Hold on. Excuse me just a second. Oh, this is the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. There's nobody here from the advisory board? Okay. Chris, is the city making a presentation in any way?
Sorry, I was a split attention working on something else. So we are on are you on page 3?
Yes, we're the castle.
Yes, let me look to
Tricia?
Chris Cooper, Trish, maybe to come and
Trish, would you want to give us a little summary?
just give the foundation of where we are.
What the recommendation was of the Historic Preservation Board and any other comments you may have with regard.
Sure. Good evening. Tricia Logan, Historic Preservation Planner from the Department of Sustainable Development. The Historic Preservation Board did review the application that was submitted by the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation and made a recommendation to approve the designation of the castle, but only the structure and not the surrounding land. And that would be under certain criteria that are applicable from the ULDR, and that includes criterion A from the main section of our criteria applying to historic designation, and then we also have a subsection of criterion considerations that the board could consider when the property has certain aspects that are less than 50 years old. So in this case, the property does exhibit a later alteration that was done in 1973. And so that makes it eligible for those criterion considerations within our ULDR. So the board did find that it did qualify for criterion F of that subsection. staff had recommended that it also qualified under an additional criteria within the ULDR as well, and that was for its architectural significance and its representation for a particular architectural style and the use of indigenous materials. But I can answer any specific questions that you may have.
So I noticed that the advisory board had recommended historic designation, but not for the land on which it stands, but only for the building itself.
That's correct.
Okay. How does the city commission, if the city commission were to adopt the recommendation, how do we affect that decision in practical terms?
If you were to
Designate the building but not the site.
if you were to only
What do we do? How does that play out?
If you were to only designate the structure and not the site, that's something that has been done in the past. The First Lutheran Church on 3rd Avenue, only the exterior of the structure that was the historic portion of the building that has the stone facade was designated, as well as the roof structure. And then we also have one other residential property where only the building is designated.
I'm sorry, what'd you say with the what building?
It's in Riverside Park. It's called the Bender Residence.
Okay.
And it was at the request of the applicant that it only be the residential structure and not the surrounding land in that case. And that was approved by both the Historic Preservation Board and the City Commission. But that is possible. It would just need to be written into the resolution as such.
Would you say that that's typical or atypical in terms of bifurcating the structure from the land?
It's atypical. In our ULDR, it does automatically include the land as part of any designation.
Why?
It's part of the significance related to a structure. You want to include its setting and its location, which oftentimes relate back to the criteria in which it's designated. So in this case, under the first criteria listed in the main section of the code for designation applications, how it qualifies for that criterion is through its location and setting. So taking away the land or relocating that property would affect its significance.
So Trish, are you saying that one of the criteria that was used to designate this actually did encompass the language of through its location and setting?
So within the staff report that was presented to the Historic Preservation Board, its qualifications under criterion A is for its cultural significance. And for its cultural significance, the explanation behind it is because of its location at the base of a bridge that existed and the overall setting that still exists today, where you can still see remnants of where that bridge was located, the siting of the structure on the property and how it's oriented can tell a story behind of why that existed in the past and can convey the historic significance through how you actually see it and view it today. Because you can see it from the river, you can see it from the roadway, you also see the surroundings where you're seeing that connection to the other side of the river.
So was that criteria A, was that actually adopted? When the HPB designated the structure, did they delineate which criteria they thought were met?
Yes, they did. So
what were those criteria that they actually accepted as?
So in the case of historic designations, the Historic Preservation Board acts as a recommending body to the City Commission. So in their recommendation, they did outline that criterion A was included, and that was part of its significance, as well as in the subsection of the criterion considerations, criterion F,
So A and F.
which is saying that because there's alterations on the property that are visible, are less than 50 years old, those alterations are still considered significant and contributing to the property's overall historic significance.
And did you say that you also, in your staff report, recommended another criteria as well that you thought it met?
I did.
Which one was that?
And I believe that was F as well.
Oh, but the application itself, the original application was how many criteria?
2. And then because of some additional findings that I had as part of my research and preparing the staff report, I also included the criterion consideration for the less than 50 years old
F.
items. Yeah.
So, and so the applicant submitted under A, the cultural significance?
Correct.
And anything else besides A?
And I believe it's also F.
Oh, F. So the same
there's
as you already had F, though.
So there's a main section of our criteria
Okay.
that's outlined within the code, and they use a lettering system. Then we also have another section within the code that talks about criterion considerations.
Okay.
So those are different, it's a different set of criteria that would be applied in only specific cases, but it's in addition to what we typically would apply. So the applicant applied under 2 criteria, one for cultural significance and one for significance of an architectural style with the use of an indigenous material.
Yes.
And then because of that additional research that was undertaken and the finding of the fact that that later alteration to apply the coral rock to the exterior is less than 50 years old, we had to look at our criterion considerations and apply one of those. So there's 2 sets of things, but we typically don't apply the criterion considerations. It's only in certain circumstances.
So if you say that criteria A, which deals with the cultural significance, and then by the nature of the fact that it's the cultural significance, you also went on to say that encompasses location and setting, how could the HPB designate based on that criteria and then take away the land? That seems to contradict the criteria A.
It's their recommendation. I can't speak to why they made that decision.
Do you see any contradiction there, though?
It doesn't align with what my recommendation or my staff report outlined as far as how the building does qualify for historic designation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
And Mayor, if I can just note that typically, that the city is not the applicant, the HPB is not the applicant. They're not, this item is not before you because of them necessarily. There is an applicant, so it is the applicant's burden to demonstrate that there is these criteria met. Since this is quasi-judicial, we haven't heard from the applicant.
I understand that, but I do know that we made a report, the city made a report. It's 103 pages, and it recommends supporting the Historic Preservation Board's recommendation. So,
correct, but since it's quasi-judicial, we really should hear from the applicant, so there's some evidence put in the record.
all right.
Can I just ask Tricia a question, Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Tricia, what's criterion G?
And I may have misspoke
That's
on what it was.
yeah,
I guess
that's 8G. That's the
A and
the
G
criterion consideration that
is F.
she was referring to. That's 8G.
8, so
there's 7A or 7F. I believe they applied under 7A and F, and then the considerations that Tricia was just referring to are under C8G.
Is Michaela here?
okay, so G is what you were calling,
The reason why we have to apply the consideration for alterations that occurred less than 50 years.
right, which you were calling 8F. Okay.
I
all right.
misspoke.
That's all good. So I'm good because I'm just looking at the minutes. So HPB said criterion A and G as outlined with the designation, with the condition that the designation apply only to the building, not the property. And that's what passed 4-2 ultimately. Is
That was what
tracking
passed
that right?
in their motion for the recommendation to the commission.
So they kind of lifted up both criterion, but parsed out the property, as it were.
So the applicant applied under 2 of the criteria
Right.
within our code. Staff supported that in their findings as far as, yes, it does meet those.
Right.
Staff also added a 3rd criterion, but under a subsection for the less than 50-year situation. And then the board only identified one of the main criteria as it being qualified for.
Right.
And then also for that subsection.
This subsection. Okay, great. That helps clarify for me. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, great.
I just have a question for staff too, while you're up there, Tricia. Do we have properties in the city of Fort Lauderdale, and forgive me for not knowing this answer, that are young, less than 50 years old, that we have taken the steps to identify as historic?
We do. One of the primary structures is the main library that is less than 50 years old. It was built in 1982 or 83.
Okay, and who proposed that?
I believe it was the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation.
Okay. So does
I believe the main library was actually, the applicant was Broward County itself.
Oh, perhaps.
It was the Broward County Historical Commission.
Oh, okay.
Through Broward County did the main library.
Oh, at the time when they existed.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the library. Is it a problem, Alan, that the applicant isn't here for this?
The applicant's here.
The
The
applicant.
applicant is here.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah, I haven't gone to them yet.
Okay, sorry, all right.
Okay,
All right, let me just hear a little bit more then. Okay.
it's okay. Is Michaela, are you here? There you are. Hi.
There she is.
Want to come up to the podium and give you a few minutes to back up?
I have some backup material. It's basically the presentation, oral presentation. So I don't want it to eat into my time, so I don't know what to do with it.
Why don't you just give it to the clerk?
Thank you.
And why don't you take a few minutes and give us your presentation?
Thank you.
So for all of you that don't know me, I'm Michaela Conca, President of Broward Trust for Historic Presentation. So good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Commissioners. And thank you for reviewing and accepting the application for a historic landmark designation on the New River Castle. Mr. Cole bought the land knowing that it had the potential for historic concerns, and it was his choice to move forward with the purchase. And before I go any further, a little bit of what Tricia just spoke to, I am going to go over, so that might clarify some of it. The structure is a historical landmark, and we know this from staff's report, Mr. McAloon's research, and the research presented by the Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. The New River Castle is vital to the city and Tarpon River, based on the subject criteria A, which says its value is a significant reminder of the cultural, archaeological heritage of the city, state, and nation. All research shows that the New River Castle and the land in which it sits are a significant part of the history of Fort Lauderdale. According to the maps created by Flagler's civil engineer, A.L. Knowlton, who first platted and subdivided the land, was known as Fort Lauderdale in 1895. Block 36 is part of that map, with lots 12 and 11 marked out and running along the New River. This information helps define the period of significance, and the research strengthens it to the subject criteria A. The proximity of lots 12 and 11 to the former 7th Avenue Bridge, also known as Coley Avenue, gives us reason to believe the original structure has been a bridge tender's cottage. We also know an apartment, which came later, was contained in it too. The 7th Avenue Bridge, whether used often or not, contributed to binding the north and south sides of our town. In Tricia Logan's staff report, she says that the third bascule bridge, constructed in 1920, contributed to the growth and development of the city's transportation network. This land has remained untouched for 100 years. It is part of Mary Brickell's original land, the original town of Fort Lauderdale. The whimsical castle sits on that land. If we lose another historic landmark, we effectively take part of history significant to Fort Lauderdale's culture away. The New River is significant to the history of Fort Lauderdale. It may be compared to our US 1 before we had the road. It reinforced the nautical culture of Fort Lauderdale. The river was a necessary part of our pioneers' lives and is essential today as it was 100 years ago. There is also well-documented facts that pre-Columbian history is part of the New River's archaeological heritage. The second choice is subject criteria F. It's distinguishing characteristics of an architectural style that is valuable for the study of a period, method of construction, or use of indigenous materials. The structure built between 1920 and 27 makes its historic landmark based on its age. We know now that the coral rock, the indigenous material, was applied to the original building based on a permit application in 1973. The application filed was for exterior modifications only. The chronological age of the structure brings us back to the subject criteria F, making it valuable for a study of a period and using indigenous materials. Now, staff report states, the overall architectural character and the craftsmanship employed through the application of a local craftsman to the bridge tender's quarters is an anomaly, and it does not follow the imperatives of local architecture. Its character is a departure from its immediate surroundings in Tarpon River, which include a mixture of residential housing types constructed from 1910 through the 1960s, representing a variety of architectural styles, including craftsman, mission, minimal traditional, vernacular, art moderne, transitional ranch, contemporary, and ranch. The departure from these characteristics make the architecture of the New River Castle unique and causes it to meet criterion F. In addition, due to the craftsmanship using locally sourced materials applied in a way that is unique to this building, it is found that this structure possesses exceptional importance, and the alterations that have occurred to the original structure have become significant in their own right, meeting criterion consideration G. Staff chose subject criteria G, a property achieving significance within the past 50 years if it is of exceptional importance. Now, the period of significance that Broward Trust focused on was 1890 through 1974, the 1974 adjusted by city staff. Since city staff conducted research that uncovered facts explaining the structure's exterior modifications, that they were completed in 1974, an adjustment to the final year based on all research has an end time of 1974. Broward Trust for Historic Preservation maintains the period of significance from 1890 to 1974. We did this based on the research and our subject criteria requirements. The Trust respectfully disagrees with the city staff's period of significance of 1927 to 1974. We believe the land and the structure are significant to the New River, Tarpon River, and its location because the land is part of Mary Brickell's original town of Fort Lauderdale. In conclusion, Broward Trust for Historic Preservation requests that the City of Fort Lauderdale, after careful consideration, honor the New River Castle with historic landmark designation in its entirety. Thank you again for your time and attention to this vital subject matter.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to invite there are a number of people who signed up to speak tonight, and I'm going to call your name in threes. So those names that I call, please be prepared to speak after the most recent speaker has finished. So we'll start with Susan Gillis, followed by Janet Scraper, followed by Sarah Ayers-Rigsby. Is Susan Gillis here? Hi, Susan. We're going to give each person 2 minutes, so please try to be concise.
Thank you. Good evening. Susan Gillis here. I am the author of 5 books on Fort Lauderdale history, the former curator of the Fort Lauderdale Historical Society, and the former centennial historian for Fort Lauderdale, which, oh my gosh, was 10 years ago. I would like to speak in support of the historic designation of New River Castle at 625 Southwest 5th Place. The site in question has quite a historic pedigree. The New River was once a major transportation route for the Aboriginal peoples of Southeast Florida, as well as the Seminole who came afterward. There are probably few spots along the river where these native peoples did not reside or use in some way. In the late 18th century, we know that this was part of the Lewis Plantation. They were a Bahamian family that were the first known non-Indian settlers of our region, and we believe their homestead was very close by the site in question. William and Mary Brickell of Miami fame, and of course very important Fort Lauderdale history, acquired the property, subdivided it, and it was a part of the original town limits, as mentioned, in 1895 when the Florida East Coast Railway came through. By the 20s, the property was acquired by a man named George Miller, and we know this building was built in the 20s, very likely a bridge tender's house. And it was owned by Mr. Garrity up until at least the 60s. By 73, Pete Norman acquired the property and had it turned into a coral castle using local oolitic limestone, what we would call coral rock. The Tarpon River neighborhood and the New River is redolent Fort Lauderdale history, and it saddens me to see us lose so many historic landmarks to high rises and new businesses. There's nothing wrong with that, but please, New River Castle is a whimsical, well-known reminder of the history of Fort Lauderdale. Please help us preserve it for the enjoyment of future generations. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for your sharing. Can you just, it's a minor question, but the coral rock, is that, where did they mine that, or tell me a little bit about that?
I believe it's oolitic limestone. A lot used to be keystone from the Windley Key down in the Keys. It's actually a state park. I believe that's where a lot of it came from. Is that your? I believe that's
Okay.
and it's not available anymore
Yeah.
except as salvage.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, may I ask just a question? Sure. Thank you. Susan? I'm sorry, I just have a question.
Yes, sir.
First of all, good evening, and it's nice to see you. It's been a while. I was hoping that you could give us an opinion. The one thing I am struggling with is why the Historic Preservation Board separated the land from the
Right.
structure. And hearing what you just said about the land, I want to hear your opinion about that. I mean, I can see why some structures are separated from the land.
Yes.
But this is a particularly important part of our city in terms of just the land, even without the structure.
Right.
So do you have an opinion on the fact that the HPB separated the land from the
Yes.
structure?
I'm sorry to interrupt. So we can keep, if we're going to get opinions, we need to qualify that from experts, and I don't know that we've qualified that. So
It's
we just need to be, I understand, but it's just, we're just trying to create a record. So if we're going to get opinions, it has to be fact-based, and it has to be from some kind of experts. I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, so I just wanted
Well, she gave us some of her resumes pretty good, actually.
Well, I don't know whether we have to do a proffer of her background and qualifications. She's not speaking here as an expert. She's just speaking here as she doesn't live in Fort Lauderdale, but she's speaking as someone who's taken an interest in this. So
But the opinion was asked for, and that's.
I know.
Well,
but
I asked
its proper weight.
But I asked her opinion because of the resume that she gave us in before she spoke.
May I?
Yes,
Oh,
you may
thank you.
answer.
Usually, buildings are separately designated because they're not on their original site, something that's been moved but is still important. But as the National Register of Historic Places likes to say, it's the National Register of Historic Places, not buildings. So my opinion is, yes, the site's very important and makes it that's part of the importance of the building itself. It's all
Right.
tied in.
And hence, when the church was mentioned on Third Avenue
Yes.
tonight as an example
Yeah.
of a structure being designated without the land, that in fact is exactly what you said, because that church was moved to that site.
Correct. It's not its original location.
Okay, thank
The
you.
original location? Is this the original location for this building?
Yes.
Yeah. So that doesn't answer the question, though. Why wasn't the site also designated?
Well, I'm not on HPB, so.
That was HPB made that decision.
Okay, so you don't have an opinion about that?
I don't think that was a good idea. I disagree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Janet, welcome back.
Welcome back.
You're going to have to.
Hello again.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I don't have any formal paper to read off of, so I'm just going to wing it. But I will say that I do believe that there's a lot of history here, and we haven't gone over it all in the presentation today. I hope you all did your homework and read the backup documentation, including all the people who spoke at the Historic Advisory Board Committee. We had a lot of people there. But this is important to our city, and it is important in situ where it is. This was the site of a bridge that went across the river, and you can still see across the river where the bridge was, at the other end. And this is also important because at least the lot that the castle is on, maybe not the one to the east of it, but the lot the castle is on, also encompasses Anne Murray Greenway, which has been an important part of our neighborhood since forever, but was officially taken care of by Anne Murray since the 60s. And unfortunately, the owner of the new property promptly got permission, a permit to build a fence right in the middle of our Anne Murray Greenway and took that away from us. But anyway, we don't want the castle to be taken away from us, so it's very important that we have at least the land that's under the castle on Anne Murray Greenway designated historic, as well as the structure itself.
Okay. Thank you so much. Sarah Ayers Rigsby, followed by Michael Barlow, followed by Anthony. Anthony, your handwriting is terrible. You live at 517 Southwest Fifth Avenue. You know who you are.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, good evening, and thanks so much for letting me speak this evening. My name is Sarah Ayers Rigsby, and I work for the Florida Public Archaeology Network. We're a statewide educational organization. So I always like to tell people that Florida has been a great place to live for 14,000 years. I know I only have 2 minutes, so I won't get into all 14,000 years.
Please don't go year by year.
And yes, archaeologists, right, we study the past through the things people leave behind. So this landmark helps tell the story of Fort Lauderdale, where we've been, where we've come from. I don't think I can enumerate any more on the history and do a better job than Sue or Michaela did, so I won't. But I encourage people to consider the importance of historic landmarks and this designation in, again, telling that story of the past and connecting us to our past in the city. So thank you all so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. Michael Barlow, followed by Anthony, followed by John Higginson.
Yes, Michael Barlow. I'm a resident of Tarpon River. I would just like to speak in support of the applicant as well as the recommendation of the historical board. As a resident, it's definitely something of interest in the neighborhood rather than just high rises, apartment buildings, so on and so forth. And it does tell a part of the history of Fort Lauderdale. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anthony, John Higginson, followed by Daniel. Mr. Cole, we'll have you come last, if that's okay.
No, Anthony or John.
Anthony you have 517 Southwest Fifth Avenue?
No, I'm the next one.
You're the next one. Is Anthony here?
He's working on his handwriting at home, Mayor. He'll be here soon.
Come on up, John. Followed by Joseph Andrew Beltrand, followed by Wendy Malone. Good evening, John.
Hi, I'm John Hagenson. I've been a resident of City of Fort Lauderdale for 47 years. I've been in this neighborhood for over 20 years, and I just want to express that there are certain property rights, and the homeowner should be able to, follow the proper property rights. And I have my personal concerns with the Civic Association and the president of the Civic Association, potentially issues with property rights. So I just wanted to express my concerns, and I believe that the property owners got the right to own the property, and it doesn't have to be designated as a historical.
So if the property owner decided to demolish the structure, you'd be okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I want to say I would be okay with it, or they have the rights to do what they desire with their own property.
Okay. Got it.
All right.
Thank you. Joseph Andrew Beltrand, followed by Wendy Malone, followed by Susan Prescott. You, Joseph?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to offer an expert opinion on what I think about the property over at what we call the castle.
Speak to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. As far as historical designation for properties, I did see that property when it first came up on the MLS, and it said clearly that it wasn't a historical property, which actually piqued my interest and wanted me to, it compelled me to bring investors over to look at it, because in my perception, I didn't think that the building offered any value at all to the site that it was on. So I instinctively just said, we're going to go in and we're going to, demolish it and then develop it into something else, whatever the case would be. And I also wanted to offer that when I am looking at property, or I have clients that call me and they say, hey, we've identified something like over in Idlewild or Rio Vista or something, and if I have a hint that it might be deemed historical or could become deemed historical, I always steer them away from it, just because as a matter of investment, return on their investment, locking them into what they're purchasing, not being able to increase their value with their surroundings and whatever, I would encourage them to try to find a different property.
So what is your background?
I've been a real estate agent in Fort Lauderdale for just about 8 years, and I've lived here for just over 30 years.
Okay.
And I've done a lot of, housing improvements, and my whole life has been revolving around residential improvements and marketing.
Okay, so you don't have a background in historic preservation?
None whatsoever.
Okay, all right.
Just I've been with clients who have been involved in historical situations such as this, and in my opinion, especially in a application such as Daniel's, where he's coming in to try to do something with it to improve the property, it's never a good situation to endeavor on.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Mayor, maybe this is just for my own and a few others, but at some point I'd like to hear from Anthony about if land is designated as historic, how then does that limit what can be done on that land?
Well, okay, we'll
At some point, if we could have that,
I think I know the answer, but let's the city staff.
if we could, because it would help
Yeah.
inform. Thanks.
Are you Wendy? Yes. Hi, Wendy, followed by Susan Prescott, followed by Mr. McAloon, whose handwriting is even worse. You come at the end, yeah. Yes, Wendy.
I'm just a resident here of Tarpon River, and I just wanted to express my feelings of property rights. And I believe that this issue is strictly a property rights issue. I understand designating a school or a church or something that's more publicly owned as a historical site. But this is a privately owned property that was purchased by a private resident. And I think that the Civic Association does not want to see certain things happen there. And I think they just kind of want to try to stop that. So this would be the next step to try to make it a historical site. And that's just my opinion. I think property rights should go down to any lawful purpose, and you have the right to do what you want on your property. And he bought it lawfully. And if it was such a important historical site, it was on the market and it was open for anyone to purchase that property. And it doesn't seem like it was very important to anybody historically until a potential developer purchased the property. Now all of a sudden you have people coming that aren't even from the neighborhood, all of a sudden wanting to make this thing like it's a castle that was built in 73. And now that I know that I was born in 73, so I could be called historical now. So
Welcome to the club.
that's my take on all this, if nothing else. So
You weren't born in
seeing me stand here, that, and
all
another
right.
thing too, I understand the structure was there back in the 20s, but the facade, that's calling it the New River Castle, was put on in 73. So I don't think it should even go past back that, because at that time it was just probably a concrete structure. So that's all I have to say.
Okay.
But I think this issue comes down to more a property rights issue, and let's maintain it as that and not go into anything else, because it's really not anything else other than that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, could I just call Trish up a second? I need to ask her a question because we're hearing a lot about the property rights issue, and I just want to ask her a question about that.
Okay.
Just once and for all, just so we can have the record clear. Thank you. So Trish, obviously historic preservation is something that's not new. We have a Secretary of Interior Standards. There have been court cases, of course, dealing with property rights, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you
And-
please just tell us and clarify for us what those rulings have said when it comes to historic preservation and property rights?
It's pretty simple that it's come down to the fact that historic preservation is a valid purpose for the public and is something that can be upheld at higher courts as far as it is a valid public purpose to the community and serves a greater good.
Has the Supreme Court weighed in on historic preservation and property rights?
Yes,
And what has the United States Supreme Court said?
it's the same thing as far as it's upheld the fact that historic preservation is a valid public purpose. It serves the community in a greater good and has continued to this day from that initial ruling.
So when the commission designates properties, we're not violating property rights.
No, we have federal standards that we follow that are passed along down to our state and then our local municipalities, which are actually the most stringent for historic preservation regulations.
Right. And I'm sorry.
She can answer Commissioner Sorensen's question while she's up here.
Sure.
How does it impact a property owner if it's designated?
So when a structure is designated, we're concerned about the exterior of the building that's being designated and maintaining the appearance of that exterior facade for time to come and making sure that it's preserved over time. We're not concerned about the interior for this particular property. Sometimes interiors are designated, but in this case, it wouldn't be something we would consider since it's residential and would be a use on the interior. As far as the larger property is concerned, you can certainly develop around it. You could do an addition. You have flexibility. Historic preservation isn't necessarily always trying to maintain something alone in situ by itself long term. We're looking to make sure that we're managing changes that are proposed over time so that we can retain as much historic aspects and significance of that structure moving forward, but giving flexibility so that you can have a new use or a new structure on that site. So obviously in this case, the building only takes up a small portion of the overall lot. It's located more in the corner of the property, and there's options to develop around it. It's an RD15, I believe, is the zoning district. So you do have the ability to propose multiple type of structures in that location.
Thanks, that helps. So, again, basic questions. If a building and the property are designated historic, can you move the building?
You can make the request to the Historic Preservation Board. We do have a process in place to request relocation. There's a number of criteria that are applicable to that request. Some of it's including, is it even feasible? Will it destroy the building in the process of moving it? Does moving it destroy the significance? Do you have a plan in place for that lot? And things like that. We also have a section of our code of ordinances, more like on the building side and permitting is concerned, that does have requirements that have to be fulfilled as part of a relocation application.
Okay, so if I'm hearing right, then if the building and the land are designated historic, there are still possibilities to move the building if you wanted. That's possible.
You can apply for it.
What are the additive restrictions from designating just a building historic to designate the building and the land historic?
So if you were to designate the building and the land historic, then anything that you do on the property does have to go under the purview of the Historic Preservation Ordinance. So depending on what's being proposed, it would determine the process. If you're changing out windows that are historically appropriate, that's something staff could manage at the building permit application process. But if you are looking to demolish it or do a major addition that's visible from the right-of-way or construct something new on the site, you would have to go to the Historic Preservation Board to make that request.
Right, but that's just if the building is designated. I mean, that.
Oh, no, I said if that's the building on the site. If just the building is designated, so that applies if it's the building on the site, you're
Okay.
in the whole thing.
Okay.
If the building, just if the building is designated.
Not the site. Yep.
Not the site. If they're proposing a new construction project that qualifies for our DRC review, then it would go to the Historic Preservation Board for review and comment. So that would be if they were doing a cluster development or a townhouse development or something larger. If they're simply going to be building a single-family home or a duplex, it wouldn't go through our DRC project. So the Historic Preservation Board wouldn't have to review and comment that type of application.
But if the land was designated, historic preservation would.
Correct, for new construction, yeah.
For new
Staff
construction.
would still see the application and may have a conversation with the property owner at that time if they saw an adverse effect that would occur to the actual structure, but it wouldn't necessarily trigger going before the Historic Preservation Board.
And for, again, just as I'm learning, is the Historic Preservation Board, when land is designated and there's new construction proposed, are they more limited in what they would allow based on the land being designated? I'm just trying to, I mean, would they?
If the whole property is designated,
Right.
we do have, we have criteria within our ordinance as far as what we look at for review of new construction projects in relation to a historic property. And we also have design guidelines that are applicable citywide that are more pictorial in nature, where someone could reference kind of a list of items that we would be interested in making sure that the new construction project is compatible with the historic structure on the site. And there's a lot of forms that can take. There's not one prescribed way that you can do new construction on a historic site.
And have you seen, just like, is there a recent example in your mind of where land was designated as well as a property and someone wanted to build new construction on that land and like that kind of happened recently? Does anything come to mind? Just interested.
Not anything that's coming to mind here
Okay,
recently,
that's all right.
but we
That's all
do
right.
have a lot of new construction within the Sailboat Bend Historic District. So in there, we have a lot of properties that are contributing to the district. We also have properties that are non-contributing to the district. So the non-contributing properties can be redeveloped. They're not intended for preservation, but because the whole overall district is designated, we want to ensure that anything that's going into the district is compatible. So it's an appropriate scale, it has appropriate setbacks, it's using materials that are represented throughout the neighborhood and are part of our material and design guidelines and things like that. So we're looking for mostly compatibility, and that can come in a lot of different forms.
It seems like there's a lot of flexibility there. I mean, it's what I'm hearing.
There's flexibility, but it does usually require a conversation.
Yeah.
And it's not that you can build whatever you want.
Right.
Usually
It's
just
partnership between
yeah.
Historic Preservation Board and working
And usually the
through it.
most successful projects are a result of a lot of conversations and discussion and back and forth.
And it sounds like you can still have the same density on that parcel. Am I tracking that right?
Yeah. I mean, with any proposed project, your density has to take into other considerations that are within the code, like parking
Sure,
requirements
right.
and landscape requirements and things like that.
Right. Okay. And again, if I wanted to try to move that building, if that was possible or something, that's something I could explore too, and working together and.
You can explore it. It's a lot. There's several factors that come into play that are just unknowns at this point, and we wouldn't be able to say,
Sure.
yes, that's
Yeah, I get
sure
it.
something we could consider.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So this neighborhood doesn't have the historic preservation or designation overlay like Sailboat Bend?
Correct. It's not an overall historic
All right,
district.
it's just,
Okay. Thank you. Susan Prescott, followed by Jay Scheckman, followed by Rusi Jason Corral. Susan Prescott. Oh, there you are, Susan.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for letting me speak. I too am here to oppose this historic designation. I believe that property rights are a big factor here. I myself have been a subject of property rights issues and still there, and I believe that if it wasn't for the fact that Mr. Cole put a fence on, I think someone brought up the Anne Murray Greenway, we wouldn't be here today. We would be talking about something else. The fact that he put this fence up on his property, that threw everyone into a frenzy. There was millions of emails that went out, phone calls, Zoom calls, talking about how terrible this man was and that he was doing something that was illegal on his own property. And if I were just someone listening to all of that, I would be up here trying to throw the man under the bridge at this point. But I feel that property rights are property rights. And I think that if he knew that this was going to be historically, he would have never bought the property. There was 3 or 4 months that property was on the market. There were crickets coming from the Civic Association or the Historical Association or anyone else saying, oh, we need to make this a historical site so no one can do anything on it after. It was only after this whole issue with the fence and the Anne Murray Greenway is when this all started. And I believe that if you go back through the postings that were out on social media, you will find where someone suggested that they contact this historical society to make this historic. That means he can't do anything there. So I feel bad in that respect, and I'm kind of nervous to be here tonight because I don't want to be part of the retribution that I might get from the Civic Association, but I had to come here and talk and speak, and I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I just want to say one thing, and thank you for being here and for your time. It's always a value. But when you say that it should be designated so he can't do anything on the property, that's the myth that we need to dispel. That, to me, is the crux of the matter, because as Trish Logan just testified, and she is our expert planner for historic preservation, what there is another layer, of course, because historic preservation is for the greater good of a community. And as I mentioned when I was talking to Trish, the Supreme Court has ruled on that already, the United States Supreme Court.
Right.
So, but to say that you can't do anything, it's just not true. There is that layer of having to go either to staff to make a change if you have a historic property, or go to the Historic Preservation Board. But I don't know if you've ever seen these incredible historic homes or businesses that on the outside look like they did hundreds of years ago, but on the inside, they've been totally gutted and totally made modern and magnificent. Or the same with businesses. Thursday night, there was a church on 3rd Avenue, the original St. Anthony's Church. It's the only church of its kind in the city. I don't know if you know it, all stone structure. It was the front page of the newspaper the other day. In 2 days, that church is going to open as a restaurant and a nightclub. An amazing example of adaptive reuse. So it's not correct to say if someone has a historic property, they can't do anything with the property, because that's just not true. You have to apply to do something to either staff or the board, but you can alter it, you can renovate it, you can add on to it, you can even apply to demolish it. And if you can prove that case, then you get what is called that certificate of appropriateness to do exactly what you want to do. So that's all I want to say. I just want to say we have to be careful in the words that we use. We have to be careful in, keeping those myths going that, oh my gosh, if you have a historic property, be careful, you can't do anything with it. I would also say that to the realtor. Speak to your clients and educate them so they know not to be afraid of historic preservation. Because I will show you examples of homes and properties in historic Sale Boat Bend where people spent $200,000 a few years ago and they just sold for $1 million too. So I can show you lots of examples of that. So I just think we have to dispel that myth and make sure that we understand. Now, are we at the point where I'd like us to be? I'd like us to still have more incentives. There are tax abatements from the county. There are ways to get incentives, financial incentives, and I think that's really important. This commission has already passed items such as transfer development rights. We've done things to try and incentivize historic preservation, but we have to at least understand what it is. That's all. Thank you.
But it was historical before the gentleman bought it, right? So the city had every opportunity, or the Historical Society had every opportunity to make it historical then.
Correct.
And this man bought this property not
You're right.
understanding that at some point they were going to come in and make it historical.
Let me tell you something that Mayor Noggle, do you remember Mayor Noggle?
I absolutely do.
Okay. Mayor Noggle and I used to get a kick out of this when historic preservation items would come in front of the commission. Mayor Noggle would look at the person who maybe owned the property and said, I learned a long time ago, if you're going to buy a piece of property that's full of mangroves, you better just think about it a little bit. In other words, just, I don't want to say buyer beware, but just take a look at what you're purchasing and try and think of perhaps maybe there's something that you need to consider. And the mayor always used to say that, just watch what you're buying and just understand the property, understand the history, understand what you're getting into, because it's really important as a buyer to be educated about the property. That's all.
Right, but the castle didn't become the castle until 1973. It was just a building up until that point.
Well, it was a building, right? I understand. I just want to. Again, we can always debate that, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm more concerned with just dispelling some of the myths that are out there concerning historic preservation.
I understand. I'm just talking about property rights in general.
I understand, and the Supreme Court has ruled on that. Thank you.
Great. Jay Schechtman, followed by Rusi, followed by Ed Brin.
Mayor, I have a couple of things to present as evidence.
Sure.
And I would ask as president of neighborhood to have 5 minutes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Which neighborhood?
I'm the president of the Tarpon River Civic Association.
Just wanted it on the record.
Okay, and before my time starts, I'd like to just let you know, one of each. A lot of people. What's that?
You've already used up 3 minutes. So
5, please. I put a lot of time. The things that I passed out are 1949 aerial with the property circled in red, and from the Historic Preservation Board, an image of all the people who came to speak in support of the designation, many of whom couldn't be here tonight, and then a snapshot from the Zillow listing of the sale that recently transpired. Okay, I'll begin.
Okay, please do.
Mayor and Commissioners, today we are here to decide the fate of a treasured piece of history in the Tarpon River neighborhood and the city of Fort Lauderdale, which according to the Zillow listing, in connection with the recent sale of the property to Mr. Cole, is, quote, considered a landmark, ... and features a miniature fairy tale castle with cone spires and faced with coral rock inside and out, end quote. To the long-standing residents of Tarpon River, passerbys on the New River, and the city of Fort Lauderdale residents alike, this property is known for many things, including as a residence of a former bridge tender. If not for this association, locals might not know that a 1930s vintage swing bridge connected both sides of the New River, the terminus of which was on this property. If not for the unusually small size of the structure, locals wouldn't remember that in 1925 there was an embargo on the Flagler Railroad for building materials, which incentivized eager homeowners at the time to build smaller structures out of local indigenous materials. If not for this property, the city might not remember the nefarious times of Walter Clark and Johnny Elliott in the 1950s, when crime and gambling were rampant throughout the U.S. These are just a couple of many examples which illustrate how the property is, quote, valuable as a significant reminder of the cultural or archaeological history of the city, state, or nation. This is the only criteria which must be met under the ULDR, and that's why the Historic Preservation Board voted majority to support designation. It's also one of many reasons why the city has maintained a master file on this property since March of 1989, before I was born, which stated the property is, quote, eligible for the listing on the National Register of Historic Places, end quote, and touted its, quote, high degree of integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, end quote. Further, it's why the City of Fort Lauderdale Architectural Resource Survey for Tarpon River, which this commission spearheaded, identified this property as only one of 36 to be considered for historic designation. Everyone has largely agreed with the historic significance of the property, including Greg McAloon, counsel to Mr. Cole, who literally went on record at the HPB and strengthened the case for how historic it is, and then just argued that it simply isn't good history. With all of his actions, could it not be more clear that Mr. Cole is just trying to maximize every square inch of his property and therefore has every incentive to attempt to minimize and devalue the importance of this treasure to all of us? Not only is the structure significant, but the land even more so. It was part of the original plat of 1895 and was deeded by William and Mary Brickell themselves. Further, while the master file touts the importance of the land's location, setting, and feeling, and makes mentions of important figures such as William Marshall, our first mayor, and Mary Brickell, it fails to mention someone equally as important, Anne Murray, who, per a 2003 article in the Sun Sentinel, quote, tended to this plot of land since the 60s when the 7th Avenue Bridge was rebuilt, and took it upon herself to plant native species there. That same year, 150 people, including former Mayor Jim Noggle, gathered together to formally designate a portion of this land in her honor. Anne Murray is also remembered as a former president of the Native Plant Society and the Anne Murray Clothing Bank, which provided clothes for poor children in Broward County. Anne Murray came to Fort Lauderdale with her family from Baltimore in 1926 when she was only 3 years old. Today, 3-year-olds in Tarpon River know that looking down from every castle, there was a woman like Anne Murray who made life beautiful and ruled her own little kingdom. She treated everyone with kindness and had the utmost of respect for this neighborhood and its history. Our hope is that our commission will do the same here tonight. Per the Broward County website, property appraisers, the 794 square foot area of the building, nestled way in the corner of the property, way out of the way of anything, represents only 4.4% of the roughly 17,900 square foot lot. Please do what's right for the city and the neighborhood. The property was described as a potential landmark in the Zillow sales listing, and Mr. Cole will still have a portion of the remaining 95% of the site to work through a site plan submission to the Historic Preservation Board. That seems like an entirely reasonable and fair approach, and the neighborhood would love to work with Mr. Cole if he would like our support on a site plan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jay. Your neighborhood is well represented. Russi, followed by Ed Bryn, followed by Jackie Scott, who's making a return appearance today.
Hi, my name is Russi Jason Curo. I don't know where the little camera is, but I Can any of you see what the castle is here? Does it show up on?
No, it's a glare. But what
Oh,
is it?
well.
What does it say? What is it? It's a picture
just
of the house, right?
Castle. Yeah, just a picture.
Okay.
But anyway, the thing is that this castle definitely should not be torn down. I've been a resident here for about 30 years. I didn't even know about this castle, to tell you the truth. I know that it sits right across the river from a writer, I think it is, that has a railroad car next to his house. If you look the opposite way, you would see the castle. The castle also has been built with a great amount of love and concern because it's artistically beautiful. It's artistically done if you would go and just look at how it is built. And I think, Fort Lauderdale has a lot of great things, but is there any other thing that's even half as whimsical as this? No, we have all these buildings going up and things like that, but something so cute, so whimsical, so unusual, so unique is something that we should really cherish. And that's what I think. So thanks a lot. And also, one other thing. Can it possibly be included into the Anne Murray area? I mean, could that little bit be included in Anne Murray?
I don't know.
Why not?
All right, thank you. Ed Bryn, followed by Jacqueline Scott, followed by the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Ed Bryn, and I live next door to the castle. And I knew
Can
Chuck
you speak a
would-
little bit more into the microphone?
Pardon?
Can you speak a little bit more in the microphone? It's not
Yeah.
very sensitive.
All right, well, Chuck Norman was a friend of mine. I lived on the next street on 6th Street, and he built the castle. Well, he had a guy put chicken wire on it, and they put the mud on it and built it. But it used to be a 2-car garage downstairs with an efficiency upstairs. That's all it was. So, and to say it's historical, it's kind of hard to say that because when I bought my house, it was an old house. Now there's a gumbo limbo tree in the front there, but when we first bought the house, was about 3 months, the city had architects going through our backyard. Well, we found out that when I bought the place, the lady said, we don't own the riverfront. The city owned it. And they're making all this stuff about this castle. The city was going to come from 6th Avenue to 7th Avenue with a road back there and put boat slips in our backyard. And we sued the city and we won the property back because the city was not supposed to use the land for profit or gain. So, the city says one thing, they want to preserve something, but you didn't see the history of it before that. That's all I got to tell you about it right now.
Okay, thank you, sir. Jackie Scott?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be back here this evening. I wanted to just make 3 points about this requested historical designation. Number one, obviously this site has tremendous value to the neighborhood and probably to the entire city as people look and see what is on that site. If you recall, in 2011, I got moved into helping Elisa Plummer and the group, and Mayor, you were instrumental helping as well to save the Shippey House. That took thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars in money, and we did it, and it had great historic value. As a commission, you now have the opportunity during your tenure together to now have another historic designation. I don't think we have had as a city enough historic designations over the years. So I hope that you all will look at this as an opportunity to say, yes, we saved and created, saved a historic property, and I think it's going to be good for everyone. Now, I have to compete with Joe Beltran, my fellow realtor, because if he's an expert after 8 years, I am a major expert after 20 and 65 years living here. And I have to tell you, and as a marketing person of real estate, I can't imagine why I wouldn't want to market this site if you designate it and the individual decides he wants to build around it and he gets approved, that's a marketing dream. How many sites are you going to go to look at an apartment or a townhouse or whatever is created there and say, oh, yes, I live by the castle? So I really think there's a lot of positives, and I want to take the high road to say, I really hope that you'll designate this, and I think it's going to be a win-win for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other than the applicant, is there anyone else who'd like to speak with regard? I'm sorry? I'm sorry. I meant to say the property owner. I'm sorry. Thank you. Other than the property owner, is there anyone else who wishes to speak with regard to this item? Okay. Mr. McAloon and Mr. Cole. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. I must start that I feel quite honored that two members of the Planning and Zoning Board made it an effort to be opposed to it, and I've never seen that before, so it's very interesting. As it relates to this, you've heard the Anna Marie Greenway a lot. That's why we're here. We're not here for historic designation. It doesn't meet the criteria. If it did, then it would be specifically under subsection G, which the applicant didn't apply for. As the own city attorney stated, it's up to the applicant to prove the burden. The city doesn't prove the burden for the applicant. They only did it under subsection A and F, and it doesn't apply to any properties under 50 years. So that whole speech about going through A and F, on appeal, we win. The only one is G, which is what the city proffered forward with it for less than 50 years. All the testimony, all the evidence, and this is quasi-judicial, meaning evidence, not feeling, says that the reason it's historic is because it's a castle property. We have stipulated on the record that the castle portion of the structure was built in 73 with it. We're less than 50 years, A and F don't apply. The only one that would apply again is G. Next to the Historic Preservation Board, and why did they do it? Why did they do it? It's because they wanted to deny it. The chair kept pushing forward saying they had to vote, and then the city attorney on the record, assistant city attorney, said you must find under subsection G again. The board was only going to find under A and F until I produced the evidence to Tricia, telling her the coral stone was produced in 73 in an effort to try and give information ahead of time in an effort to compromise and communicate. In relation to Ms. Scott's comment about build around it, that was Daniel's plan when he came here, except he got met on day one when he put a fence on his property line pursuant to a survey for a property that he lawfully bought that wasn't historically designated for it. And then the Tarpon River president came up and said, you are going to have to go through me. After that, somehow a stop work order got placed on the property. I don't know how. It hasn't been clarified to me. I don't know how it got there, but we're still looking into it to see. To Miss Sue's point over there, these are residents in Tarpon River who have been affected. They're telling you what is happening, and we have a commissioner fighting a resident telling her public opinion how it goes. I have the utmost respect for your job. I have the utmost respect for the neighborhood, and I have the utmost respect for history. However, we must use facts. We are in quasi-judicial. We aren't basing on feeling. We aren't basing on skepticism. This was not a bridge tender's house. The only citation for that was a 1973 article with the Pete Norman in it as well. In terms of historical references, you always need two sources in order to do so. There was no backup with it, and all the arguments put forth could apply to the whole Rio Vista neighborhood. All of Rio Vista was owned by Mary Brickell with it. All of Coley Hammock was owned by the Bryans over there with it. You could make the same argument about every single property in Coley Hammock and Rio Vista, yet that's not happening to these neighborhoods, and I don't know why. All that's happening is Mr. Cole has had to spend quite a bit of money in proving his property rights against information which has been falsely stated against his property by people who have been issuing stop work orders, which we don't know where we come from. I didn't mean to put it all out there like that with it, and I had a lot different presentation lined up before I heard with it, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to go at the end here because what I'll end with this, we deal with facts, we deal with evidence, we deal with criteria. I can't go to your house and say, it makes me feel some type of way, and then get historically designated with it. As it relates to HPB board, I'll read quotes from the board itself. You know the old days when people used designation to stop development and use it wrongly. There are people who got up tonight and started talking about concrete mansions as a way to stop growth, and those types of things scare me. You know, it doesn't seem like their heart is in the right place for the castle. It seems like they're trying to stop something from potentially happening down the road. And that's another thing, potentially happening. He has not submitted one development plan. He has not made one move except pull a fence permit, which was subsequently stopped in accordance with the survey, which he lawfully acquired, which is backed by the title documents that we have before it. So at the end of the day, I agree with you, Commissioner Glassman, that, well, first, I don't agree that, and I object that a non-lawyer was giving an opinion on a Supreme Court decision. But regardless, I do agree that the Supreme Court has found that historic designation is not a burden. However, you must follow the criteria and have the appropriate evidence, otherwise it is unreasonable and arbitrary and capricious in light of it, which we will fully intend to uphold with it. And again, I did not intend to come up here and make this presentation, but I did have to make this known on the record to show the gravity of the issue. And the residents coming from Tarpon River giving their opinion shows the gravity of the nature as well. Otherwise, I would not be able to get them out here with it. Just as a final point, the board, in terms of HPB, there was 3 different motions on the floor. One to approve, it didn't get a second. One to deny, it failed by a 3-3 vote, and then they just wanted to go home. And they said the decision is in the board of the commission. And I have multiple statements in this record, which is transcribed by a court reporter and certified, that state that they don't know what to do. They don't have enough information. There's been conflicting information. At the end of the day, you should want to get it right and uphold property interest while trying to appease a great deal with it. Instead, we're focusing narrowly on just one type of way people felt within a 30-year period that you're going to now devalue his property, force him to go through HPB so they could have whimsical design considerations for his developments, which then break it out to the realm of reasonability, which he never anticipated in the first place. So, again, I have the utmost respect for history. I have the utmost respect for your positions and your jobs and your duty. But above all, I respect private property, and I do not agree that this man should have gone through what he's gone through in this city, because it has been the most unwelcoming experience he's had.
Well, okay. Mr. Cole, did you want to add to that?
I originally bought the property. I love Fort Lauderdale, coming down here using my boat and stuff, and I bought it. I thought it was a cool property, and then I would develop it one day. It was zoned RD15 for single family homes or townhomes in the community. I started enjoying the property I've got small kids. My daughter's 6 and my son's 9. I started using the property, and then some illegal activity and stuff started happening in the Ann Murray Greenway next door. So I was forced to pull. There was stuff that you wouldn't want your 6-year-old seeing. So I was forced to pull a fence permit to put up some privacy, so my daughter didn't have to see what all was going on over there. Ever since that, Mr. Scheckman's basically said, hey, we wanted to use your land for the city park, and if you're going to fence that off, I'm going to run you through the ringer. And I think it's a conflict of interest for him to have anything to do with this property on the planning and zoning of whether I do something next year or 10 years from now. As far as the historical goes, it doesn't meet the criteria. They're saying stuff about coral. I buy coral stone every day, and we use it as our walkways and pool decks on some of our subdivisions. It's the same coral stone that I'm looking at on the castle. The historical designation is just a stepping stone for Jay and to try to run me through the ringer on doing something with this property one day. That's simply all it is. Let me go through the others. Oh yeah, as far as the Zillow ad goes, he wants to reference the Zillow ad, but he just references part of the Zillow ad. The part that he references is what he references. I've got the Zillow ad right here on my phone from when I bought the property. I'll be happy to send it to any of y'all, and it says strictly non-historical designation on this property. So anyways, I bought the property to do the stuff. This is simply a cheap shot to basically devalue and take away my property rights, and it's not right.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. Anyone else wish to speak on this item? There being none, do I hear a motion to close public hearing?
Moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll. Is Mr. McKenzie around?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Looking good.
Vice Mayor Moritas?
Yes.
It's like that little Christmas gnome that moves all around the world. You got to find him.
Elf on the shelf, yeah. He's an elf on
Where is
the
he now? Where is
Elf on the shelf.
There it is.
Tarlisha's fallen out of her chair, Commissioner.
Where is he? There he is.
You got her really laughing.
I'm sorry.
Okay, please call the roll.
I think he did. I
Commissioner
said yes.
Glassman?
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie? Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Mayor Trentels?
Yes, so public hearing is now closed. Commissioner Sorensen, it's in your district. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, Mayor, I think it'd be helpful to hear from staff or Alan or whoever again, I'm not an expert on historical designation, but the 50-year criteria and the property owner arguing that it doesn't meet that standard. I'd like to hear a little bit about that, Alan.
Tricia can probably give you more about the
Okay.
standard, although I can point out that in the application, they do not have to cite, that's additional criteria, so they don't have to apply under G. They only have to apply under A and F, so that's not necessarily a problem in that regard.
Okay.
But as to the particular significance of the content of G, Tricia's better at.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm at, is kind of give us a little bit of feedback to the property owner's suggestions there, that if you could.
So part of it, what was mentioned was the fact that you would only need to apply under the criteria consideration, and that would be the only thing that would need to be upheld, but that's not the case. That's in addition to the main section of the historic designation criteria under section 47, 2411, C7, and then all of the letters that go under that. As far as the 50-year, there's a rule of thumb within historic preservation where anything that's less than 50 years old does need to be found to be exceptional. So there's additional weight placed on that, an additional study to say, does this building, does this structure or property, is it exceptional? Because we have this sense of time and history where after 50 years, we can kind of start to grasp, this is important. This is something in history that makes sense of something we would like to preserve. But before that, it's a little more difficult to contextualize it. But in this case, we found that it met criterion G for exceptional for less than 50 years old because of the craftsmanship involved with the application of the coral rock. If you look back at the staff report for the Historic Preservation Board, it does talk about a newspaper article that was published in 1974 concerning the application of the coral rock and it winning an award locally through a builders association. So that's how it expresses itself through history and its significance and tells that story. So
Okay.
it's something unique, and it's a departure from what we see.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. That helps understand.
Okay, Mr. McAloon, do you want to respond?
Yeah, again, I would just like to object to a non-attorney stating this. In criteria consideration, it states, properties that have achieved significance within the past 50 years shall not be considered eligible for listing in the Fort Lauderdale Register. It's not some nebulous standard. It's if it's less than 50 years, it shall not be considered unless it's of exceptional importance. You can't find for cultural heritage, you can't find for that. All your testimony and evidence is based on the less than 53-year threshold. They tried to back end it by being able to put the 1870 to 1974 once I informed them of it. And additionally...
Well, wait a minute. Didn't Trish just say that the exceptionality was based on the workmanship of the application of the coral stone to the facade?
So I talked to the builder's son, Anthony Abadi. He had an opportunity to be out here. He said it's not historic. Why aren't they out there? Everyone's giving anecdotes about things they think instead of facts. I deal in facts. I deal in law.
But she said that the application of the coral stone won an award. So how is that not fact?
Well, essentially in 1974, when it was constructed by the Builders Association, which was a self-serving advertising article, because you just got done with the OPEC crisis in 72, 73. There's an economic downturn happening at that time with it, and then you had the Builders Association self-promoting through that thing. The constructor was Abadi. You know Anthony Abadi, you know his brother with it. Why isn't he here? Why isn't he saying this is of exceptional importance based on its craftsmanship?
It's not required to be here.
No, but again, you have people saying it's exceptional based on craftsman the year it's built with it in an article when you have all these other things without any secondary source. My thing is that we're dealing in things we think are facts without proving facts, and that's very dangerous.
Well, okay. Mayor, if I may add, Mr. McAloon,
Oh,
Mr. Boileau, right here, the attorney, the attorney.
I don't know who's in the room or where they are. They just seem to be pop up.
Mr. McAloon cites to 8, the criterion consideration, subsection 8, and did state that properties that have achieved significance within the past 50 years shall not be considered eligible for listing in the Fort Lauderdale Register of Historic Places. But it continues. However, such properties will qualify for designation if they are integral parts of districts that do meet the criteria listed in 47-2411C7, which is the A and F sections we've been talking about of the ULDR, or if they fall within one of the following categories found in the federal regulations, 36 CFR 60 as amended, and then there's a variety of criterion, including G, which is a property achieving significance within the past 50 years, if it is of exceptional importance, which was what Tricia was alluding to.
She identified.
So that's the entirety of the section.
And Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, but is exceptional importance, is there a objective standard to that, or is it more subjective?
That's up for you all to
It's
decide.
more opinion, right? I mean, it's what's.
I would have to defer to the historical folks for
Yeah,
that.
okay.
There's not a legal definition of it.
Right, and yeah, it seems subjective.
So it's not just this criteria that you can look at, you have to look at A or F as well, and here I believe they applied under.
And just so I'm clear, what Greg mentions objecting to non-attorney is. Give me, what does that mean?
In a quasi-judicial, yeah, so you can't really have a non-attorney you have to qualify your experts. So in a quasi-judicial, you're going to consider the application, consider the record that's before you in the backup, staff report, which is part of the record, part of the evidence, as well as the HPB recommendation and that record as well. And then, of course, public comment. But public comment has to be fact-based. So merely an opinion, I think it looks pretty, for example, is not evidence you can consider. Considerations about Anne Mary Greenway, I don't think that was considered in HPB. I'm not sure. That's not really part of the application. Mm-hmm. It has to be fact-based, dealing with the property or the structure itself. So if you have someone come up and say, hey, I'm an expert in real estate because I've been doing it for 8 years, I don't know that qualifies. So
Gotcha.
You have to qualify yourself to be able to
Right,
give an opinion on a particular, right.
Right.
You need to do that because you have to decide what is competent substantial evidence, and that has to be fact-based. So opinions, when they come in the form of an opinion, it's got to be backed up by some expertise, because otherwise it's just somebody's opinion that, it looks pretty.
Right. Okay. Does Tricia Logan qualify as an expert, or can we take her testimony?
Or for the historical, yes, she has the credentials on all the historical aspects. Legal or not, I can tell you, I can just replicate what she said. It's Penn Central Station, which is the case she was referring to, the U.S. Supreme Court case. I can attest to what she said, so there you go. That's resolved.
Okay. All right. That helps me. Thanks.
Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up on that. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Thanks. That's it for now.
Are you finished? No. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we understand that she is considered an expert in this field.
Yeah, she has all the credentials. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So when she writes a report and I read what she says and I read why she believes certain criteria are met, can I consider that facts?
Yeah, she can. You can rely on, and especially if it's replicated in staff report, which I believe it is. It's a very lengthy staff report. That is considered part of your backup. That is considered competent substantial evidence, and obviously her opinions in that regard, because she's qualified, can do that.
Right. And then also, although we are discussing a variety of criterion on this case, correct me if I'm wrong, our ordinance speaks to the fact that you only have to meet one criterion, correct?
Yeah, that's correct, isn't it? But don't point, tell me.
I would just like to make.
Wait a minute, are you finished?
Yeah. Are all the rebuttal, is this considered public comment or just continuous rebuttal or what?
No, we can call him up if he wants to respond. He is the owner of the property.
Right.
I think in fairness,
Okay.
he should have that right.
No, I just want to understand the process. I'm good. I'm waiting just to hear the answer to the question. For Alan.
Just wait.
No. Public comment is now closed. Public comment is now closed. Okay.
All right. So It has to be, so if you're gonna have just one, so if you're, let's say A and F here that we're dealing with, so if it's just gonna be one of those, you're gonna have to go to 8G as well to back that up and have those two. So it can't be just A on its own or just F on its own. It would have to be 8 and 8G in this case, but, or,
Go ahead, Alan.
so, to your point, the first set of criteria, which here we're dealing with A and F, it would have to be, if you're gonna have just A, then you're gonna need 8G as well. Same thing with F. If you're gonna have F, then you'd have to have the 8G as well.
And why is that exactly?
That's how the code's written.
Okay.
Because it's under 50 years, yeah.
I got you. How long, well, maybe I should add, how, the original structure is how old?
Tricia, question.
Tricia, where's Tricia? I'm
I
sorry.
think 1920s, was it?
Staff research believes it's circa 1927. The information that was submitted by the applicant was slightly different, a little bit earlier, but we don't have a specific date. It's just based on looking at aerial photos and maps and things that can support that.
So that exact structure?
Yes, that exact structure.
Okay, so Alan, that exact structure?
Not the coral,
Well, the
not the,
footprint.
Well, no, I understand, but the structure itself, we're saying to the
Structure was built in the 20s, but all the accoutrements were added
Wow.
later in time.
which I believe is the accoutrement that makes it exceptional under the under 8G.
Well, one could argue that just the mere fact that a structure from the 1920s that's sitting on this particular piece of archaeological significant land could also make it historic.
It's 14,000 years old.
Well, yes. Maybe you could tell us about those days. Yes. So, Alan, if this was a structure from the 1920s, why do you also then need the rest of those criteria?
Because it's just the house in it. I don't think there was a finding that the house in and of itself, without the coral and the accoutrement, would actually be historical. So just having a house in the 20s just for itself for the age. And again, Tricia can speak to that, but there would have to be more than just the age.
Right.
Okay.
In this case, the exterior does have the applied material that was included less than 50 years ago. So in my analysis, I believe it does need to meet that criterion as well.
Okay. And in your report, I've been looking through, did you actually, well, you agreed with A, correct?
Correct.
Again, I'm going to say that I have a hard time understanding how you could cite A, but not think that the land is significant in the fact that this is potentially a
Right.
very archaeologically significant site. The names that were mentioned in the report in terms of the fathers and mothers of Fort Lauderdale history, all those names are very well-known names in terms of owners of the land even, correct? Even Mr. Miller was the owner of the Las Olas Hotel. I don't think that was mentioned tonight, but these are all names throughout our history that are all significant, and they owned the land.
Correct. Yeah, the staff report wasn't suggesting that the land not be included in the designation. That's something that is automatically included as part of our ULDR. What the Historic Preservation Board did recommend is to exclude the land as part of the designation. So that was their determination.
Alan, would we have the option of, I believe there's a lot 11 and a lot 12 here. The castle's actually on lot 12, I believe. Would we have the option to actually designate just that portion of the land, lot 12, where the castle actually sits, and not designate the rest of the site, which is lot 11?
Probably. I would think so, yes, but that's kind of on the fly.
Well, for me, it's something in between what HPB did and then also wanting to, actually, I'll just say that I actually do believe that the land is very archaeologically significant.
You could, but if you're going to extend, and this is just an observation off the cuff, but if you're going to say that, let's say that lot itself is historical because of its location, that would equally apply to the lot right next to it, I would think. So you'd have to justify that separation
Well, I
you
guess the
have to-
justification would be that that's where the structure is on that particular lot.
Right, but the analysis for the property also being of significance, I think would apply to both parcels, but that I would have to defer to Tricia on that as well.
What do you think?
I mean, in this case, you could have potentially have split the lots long ago, and the property itself, the structure itself sits on the one parcel. But the way that the application was submitted, it was for the entire site as it exists today.
Correct, but then HPB did not support that in its entirety. They
Correct.
designated the structure, but not any of the land, right? And I just think that's much of an extreme. In this case, especially when I read the history of the land. And probably actually, if you dug in that land, you might come up with some interesting findings.
It is in an archaeologically significant zone, however.
You said it is.
It is, but that was not applied for as part of the designation application
Correct,
for an archaeological site consideration.
right.
If you were only to retain the lot that the building sits on as part of the designation, in that sense, you are retaining its immediate surroundings on the parcel and its immediate setting, but it does vary from what the applicant initially applied for.
Okay, I understand. Do we have the ability as a commission to actually do something like what you just said, actually cite something that was not originally applied for in the application? Like if we think, well, you really, like, if we say the applicant missed the boat on something and we think this should have been included, do we have the ability
I would
to
defer
do
to
that?
our city attorney's office on that as far as their opinion.
No, you're pretty much relegated to the record before you.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Okay, I'm good. Thanks, Mayor.
Vice Mayor, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nothing I really, I don't have any questions. I've heard everyone's comments. I really appreciate everyone coming out. I do think it's an interesting structure, but I personally don't feel like I've heard enough evidence to vote to make it historic. If the neighbors would like us to maybe consider moving it somewhere else or putting it on a park or something, I think we could certainly have those conversations. But I know today we're just focusing on, is this historic or isn't it? I just don't think I've heard the evidence to vote to make it historic. That being said, I would be open to discussion about obviously moving this somewhere.
Okay. Commissioner McKenzie, did you want to add to this?
I'm Tricia. Logan?
Trish, come up to the podium, please.
The applicant made a comment about Mr. Abate and the core rock. I'm in the construction business, and have we determined if that's rock or a stucco facade? How do we know that that's core rock?
We're basing information off of the 1974 article that recognized the building for its
But that's an article. Right now, that's an article. Right now, I can go to anybody's house and duplicate that core rock with a stucco texture. And you couldn't tell the difference unless you dissected it.
I mean, you can also see visually different elements.
That's what I want to know, because we're saying that this is core rock and we don't know it to be true or factual.
Well,
So-
I haven't retrieved a sample of the structure.
We're having a hearing and everyone's referring to the stucco or the core rock to be this historical addition in 73 or whatever that year is. And I'm just curious to know, is it a rock or a facade?
Yeah, all of the information that we have in front of us points to the fact that it is coral rock. And that's part of historic preservation analysis, is to do a visual inspection and then to do research.
So we do not know that to be rock or a facade.
Unless I actually did a forensic analysis on the actual piece of rock, then I couldn't confirm it.
But that's the
other
reference
than
we
telling you
use.
my opinion by touch and appearance.
That's the reference we use to get here. So I just need clarity from what I do daily, that it's rock or a facade. And the other question would be, I know it got an award, but we just did an application for the Realtors Association to have a event on top of the garage, and it was just the Realtors Association. I belong to a Builders Association, and if you're an accountant, you belong to an Accountant Association, and there's always awards being given, even with the attorneys and whatever else we do. And it doesn't make it an official award of a historical body that can designate. So when we reference these things, I just want factual information, but to reference a Builders Association, it costs me $100 a year. And a bunch of hammers and a bunch of people around a table looking at possible developments and things that we can do to improve our industry. You look at some of these developments now that are going up, they're getting awards. When we opened the Henderson Clinic, we had Pulte there, and Pulte Development had won numerous awards, but they were on new houses. So who's to say that the Builders Association is the historical person that puts the crown to say that this is a historical award that we're giving? Or they just say Anthony Abate was our vice president or one of the movers and shakers in the group, and we just wanted to make his project at that particular time a great project. So I just need facts when I'm trying to determine what someone's rights are about a piece of property, and I'm just not convinced that that's a rock or a facade with stucco. And the Builders Association, to me, is not a historic place. And Steve, maybe you can correct me, because it would have to be one of those places that you have frequented and know about these architectural, designations and awards. That can't just solidify that is a historical building because of an award from the Builders Association.
No, I don't think so either, but I would ask Trish, in the staff report, it does say that, records indicate that the residential structure is potentially eligible for individual listing at the local level and in the National Register of Historic Places. So who determined that the structure would potentially be eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places?
So there's been multiple reviews of this property over time, and those are located in the Florida Master Site File. And those are done usually they're coinciding with architectural resource surveys that are conducted. And I believe the first one was conducted in the 80s, again in the 90s, and then again just last year. So in these cases, they were performed, I believe, by professionals. I am certain that the one done last year was done by a professional that qualifies as a historic preservation professional and architectural historian, and can ascertain whether or not a property is potentially qualifying itself for the National Register.
So that to me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But when we're looking at making an assessment of whether or not a property is eligible for designation either locally or on the National Register, it's not based on one piece of information. It's a collection of information. And in this case, we are pointing as one of those pieces of information to the award that was provided by the Builders Association, but that's indicating that there was some community recognition, some peer recognition of what that building meant at that time. So that is significant in the context of historic preservation and in considering a designation application.
And I would say yes, although for me that's not the most significant reason why it meets the criteria. Just the mere fact that it has repeatedly been offered as eligible in the National Register of Historic Places, that's not something to be taken lightly. That's not something that, experts over time, and it looks like they've been saying this since 1995. Like the last 20-something years, reports have come out saying...
I believe the first one was in the 80s.
In the 80s.
And then again...
Okay, so for 40 years, experts in the field have said that this could be considered for local designation as well as the National Register of Historic Places, based on accumulative evidence and facts. So that to me is significant.
And I appreciate that because I know you have a deep history in this area. city attorney, if we had to defend this, and I keep hearing about this rock, I keep hearing about this award, how do we prove that to be factual or evidence that could stand up in court? How do we prove that? Because you referred to Tricia Logan as an expert. I'm not questioning that, but what I am questioning is the rock, because I know I'm an expert in the construction industry because this is what I do day in and day out, and I can duplicate any brick that you see out on a building. I can duplicate it, and I'm a part of an association of builders, and we give awards to ourselves all the time.
It obviously would be it would be optimal if there was confirmation that it's coral rock. And looking at the application, it says that New River Castle exterior construction is primarily masonry with coral rock. Upon viewing the associated photos, it is clear that the structure is built out of coral rock and masonry block, and then just defines what coral rock is. To that point, though, the property owner has not denied the fact that it's coral rock either, so we don't have that. And
It's not really an issue.
No, but I'm just saying that's what they use to convince me
But it's not
to support this designation.
But the owner there's no denial that it's coral rock.
But I can go pick up rock at the quarry right now and do that tomorrow on your
but
house.
that's not the issue.
But you can't dismiss my presentation.
It's your presentation, but it's not an issue between the parties. You're making it up.
No, I'm not making it up. You calling me a liar like he's saying I'm sleeping?
We never discussed the substance of the coral rock itself. We talked about implementation of it. We can't confirm or deny either. So, I mean, if it's at issue, it's at issue, but we never confirmed that it is coral rock. We just stated the date of implementation.
I would just like to know if it's coral rock or masonry
We don't have
with
any-
coral rock.
I don't
or-
think anyone in this
or
room
facade.
will tell you that today.
I don't think so either because we haven't done the proper testing.
So to your question, if a critical factor of the designation is the presence of coral rock, then obviously that would be something that
We have to go out and discover, right? You're the attorney. I'm just a
No, correct. No, yeah.
contractor.
Sorry. Yeah, no, you're correct.
Okay, I'm correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, anything further from the commission?
Yeah, question for Alan, I think. Wait, please.
Alan?
Getting
Sorry.
Commissioner Sorensen wants to ask you a question.
Sure.
Alan, as I'm looking at this property, there's kind of three components I'm kind of looking at. There's lot 11, which is to the east side, or let's see. No, it's to the east. Am I saying that right? Yeah, to the east side. 12's to the west, and then 7th Ave. Does that make sense? And 7th Ave is where we have the Anne Murray Greenway, basically. Does any portion of lot 12 include the vacated 7th Ave?
I would have to, I don't know, where are you looking at exactly? I want to make sure I'm looking at the same thing you are.
I'm just looking at like a Google map of the property.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to look.
Okay.
See exactly what
So one of my questions, kind of a question is, and I don't know if this can be considered at this time or that would be completely separate, is the vacated portion of 7th Ave, can that be considered historic?
Well, if you designate the entire property as historical, it's going to include that sliver, for the lack of a better term, that's been disputed for several months.
Okay.
So that will include that.
That would include that sliver on the western portion of lot 12.
What is owned by the property owner?
What is
Anything
owned by-
beyond that would not
Right.
not be. 'Cause
Beyond
that's
that.
not part of the application.
Okay. Okay. Great. So that helps. Then yeah, I guess I have a question for maybe Jay. If I can get Jay to come up here, Mayor. And my question for you, Jay, is what is your feedback on the idea of the possibility of designating lot 12, including that sliver of vacated?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, not, hold on, just.
Okay.
Because we closed public hearing, so
Right.
right now you can only really hear from staff and the parties.
Okay.
So we'd have to reopen public hearing if you're going to have.
And the parties. Okay, so parties include the applicant.
He's not a party.
Okay, that's fine. So applicant. Could the applicant come up?
The applicant can come up.
Thank you. So the possibility of designating Lot 12 and this portion of vacated Avenue, the 7th Ave, what's your reaction to that?
Just to be clear, Ben, you want to know my opinion as to designating Lot 12, which then, in fact, is part of the Anne Murray Greenway, but owned by the Daniel Cole.
Correct. And it's the lot where the sand castle sits.
You want my opinion about whether that lot should be designated?
Asking for your feedback on designating that lot, and then there's a lot
As opposed to a lot 11?
as opposed to both lots, 11 and 12.
Okay.
What is that? Alan, is that part of the purview of our inquiry and our decision-making tonight?
Well, that goes back to Commissioner Glassman's question as to whether you can designate only part of, separate out and segment what part of the property you want to designate along with the property. Again, it's debatable, and I have to defer to Tricia again as to whether, from a factual standpoint, you can argue that there's significance to Lot 12 but not 11. So that's with the historical folks. That's not with me.
Okay, that's fine. Then I can ask her. Thank you. You've got a lifeline. You're relieved. So any feedback on that, Tricia, that you're...
As I stated before, if you were to separate out the lots, you're still retaining its immediate context on the lot in which it was originally platted. In this case, the whole folio encompasses lots 11 and 12, but individually it sits on one lot in particular. So if you were to just designate that parcel, you still are retaining that immediate setting, that immediate location in which it lies. The issue may revert back to the fact that the applicant didn't apply for designation in that way.
Okay.
And staff hasn't done an analysis on whether or not to separate it out.
Okay, thanks.
But the HPB passed a motion that was not the way the applicant applied either.
Correct.
Okay.
And then, Greg, if you want any feedback or thoughts or reactions to that?
Look, so I'm of the opinion this doesn't meet the criteria. Daniel's here. He's been willing to come to the table. He's been willing to speak with you. This is the only forum we get that we get an open ear with it, although you guys have been accessible, so thank you and appreciate you being accessible. But he's open to it. My opinion as the attorney, I don't think it meets. I think it's clear as day that it's underneath 50 years, and I think it's clear as day it's not of a substantial importance. Now, if you want to talk about other considerations unrelated to this application, we got a property owner right here that's been willing to sit with you all day and be very, very reasonable in my opinion. But that's just my opinion that none of it's designated historic.
Mr. Cole, can you come up to the podium for a second? And Ms. Macklin, you can come up. You can stay there too. You know, there's been a lot of nitpicking about details and so forth and trying to justify or not justify the application and the designation. But I met you. You're a really nice guy. You're trying to do the right thing. I appreciate your wanting to move to Fort Lauderdale, bring your family here, invest the amount of money that you have. You know, we're looking at a structure that's kind of cute. It's very whimsical. It's not Downton Abbey, you know. But it's
I agree.
it looks kind of cute, you know. But the fact that this in our city is considered historic is kind of challenging because really it's not Mary Brickell's house. Okay, it's not the Brian Holmes house. It's just property that someone decided. We built the boat tender's home there. We added some features to it to make it whimsical, and now it's developed a charm over the years. And so we've romanticized this place, and the community is upset that you're trying to take it away from us. So
yeah, and I'm happy to
You get
donate it.
that.
If when I do decide to do something with the property, I'm happy to donate it, do whatever. But you don't just devalue somebody's property.
we're not trying to devalue your property. So look,
Yeah.
you're a reasonable person.
Okay.
All right. So the thing is, it's at the edge of your property. right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, you probably wouldn't even be building on the edge of this property because the most of the property, the 95% or 96% is the buildable. This is just on the corner, right? Is it not?
It is. It is on the corner. The historical board had they had a problem with voting it historic.
Well, forget
is the reason.
forget
Is the reason they broke it out to just the structure.
Forget. I'm just talking to you one on one.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not used to looking.
That's
through
okay.
blood.
So forget for the moment the Historic Preservation Advisory Board. Just forget that for just a moment. Just in terms of trying to, keep our community intact, and make them feel good about this new guy that came to town, and if what were you planning to build townhouses on this site? I believe you said you wanted to build townhouses.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I one day was planning on it's zoned for 5 townhomes, and I'm not trying to maximize, like Jay said earlier, everything I can get out of it because I like to do nice product. I was looking to do four townhomes with their own boat slips out back, which it already has. All this stuff, fix up the property and do something good for the community. And it's just I've just been hit with the Mack truck since I bought the property in May.
We don't want you. This is not that kind. We're not that kind of community, all right? So I just want to know, like, you can still build 4 townhouses and a castle, right?
What's that?
There can still be 4 townhouses and a castle.
Yes, there could technically be, but if it was that point, I would basically say, hey, I'm going to do a duplex on one side and do a nice house behind the castle. You can't really stick the house attached to because you couldn't get into it. You'd have to come in through the side back in there. Developing it, it would be basically a duplex and a single family home.
But the single family home would not represent a diminution in value compared to 2 townhouses. You would still have a significant home, right?
Yes, I would be fine. The historical designation will decrease it would ruin the project.
Why? Okay. All right. See, I don't make that connection because I've sat on this commission for almost 15 years. All right. And I've seen people making that argument. I'll never forget the time when there was a house in Rio Vista, and a gentleman came here. I was sitting right where Commissioner Sorensen was sitting as a commissioner, and I watched this gentleman who sat at the front table here tell me and swore up and down that if we designated his home historic, he was not going to be able to sell it. So the commission at that time decided not to vote and make it historic. The very next week, his realtor advertised the house for sale as historic home. Okay?
I got you.
Okay.
My question to you though is if y'all followed let's just say that y'all followed the historical boards and it was structure only. If it being structure only, the whole reason that they did that is they said, they were like you. They said, we don't want to harm you. We don't want to harm your property. That's the reason that they did historical only. And they didn't want to see me have to jump through all the different levels that are going to be set up through the civic association and everything else by designing it historic. So, all I really wanted to know is, what do y'all want?
So this is what we want.
Okay.
If we designate the building itself, the structure itself as historic, you can build whatever you want on the property. You do not have to take it to the Historic Preservation Board because you do not impact the structure itself. If you're designating the land and the structure, any portion of the land that you would build on or that would impact the land might be a different story. So as far as this commission is concerned, as I'm listening to everybody talk tonight and I'm listening to the community, you're a really nice guy and I know you're going to be a wonderful member of our community and we're really nice people here, okay? We don't want to make it difficult for you. But over time, like I said, over time, this structure has been romanticized and is charming and is kind of whimsical and all of those things. And so we don't want you to take that away from us. And even if we were to try to remove it, if it could be moved, which I don't think
I was just say, would y'all be opposed to moving it over, in the right of way and using it as a Parks and Recreation or something's office,
I don't know if it can be moved. It's the structure. I don't know if that kind of structure can be moved. It's not like a wooden house, which is built differently. I'm not a builder, but I know a little bit about, things that fall down. So
it was definitely added on because all I'm fighting a raccoon right now in there because going through one of the turrets on the outside of when they added onto it later. So, anyways,
So can we, I have an idea. Why don't we defer this, okay? And the community has spoken, and we'll figure out a way that we can keep the castle and still allow you to be able to build what you need to build on the property, and then come back to the commission and see if we can come to. I don't want there to be confrontation. I want there to be community. I'd like there to be everyone walk away feeling good about this, not feeling like they've been cheated out on something.
No. I agree. I think though that's kind of kicking the can down the road with the stuff because they're holding up my dock. I want to redo the seawall. I want to make the property nice, and
Nothing's preventing you from.
Jay calls the Marine Advisory Board and says, "Hey, you can't have this meeting because for him to improve his seawall because there's a historical designation going on this property."
Yeah, but that overstepped their boundaries. That there's no historic designation intended for the land. It's only for a structure.
I am very reasonable, and I'm open for you. If you want to defer it and you and I work together on something that's best for the community, I think that's best. I don't want this to go on for another 3, 4, 5 months and me soak up attorney fees on illegal stop work order permits on fences and everything else that I've incurred.
Well, I'm always here to help attorneys, so let me just let you know that. But anyway, I would feel better about that. I want to work something out for the community. I want to make sure that we can keep this structure intact and still allow the neighborhood to be able to benefit from it. And if you think that you and I can work out an arrangement where it can stay where it is, be intact, and you still be able to build around it to your satisfaction, I think that's the best solution at this point.
I would be open to that. The only thing that I would ask is that there is they keep calling it one property. Why did I get 2 individual tax bills? Why is there 2 parcel ID numbers when it's not one property?
That I don't know. That's a county thing.
Anyways, long story short, the lot that's not there, I would like to be able to, work with you on a site plan on that and be able to get my seawall fixed up and brought up to regulations and stuff.
All right. But okay, so now I have a promise from you. You're not going to apply for a demolition permit or anything like that.
That's correct.
Okay. And so if we did defer, would the commission be amenable to allowing this to be the next step, to allow me to
Can I ask him a question?
Defer this and allow us to work on an arrangement where we can save the castle and still preserve.
I need to ask a question.
Okay. But I mean, okay, so I'll poll the commission. Yes, Commissioner.
When you finish, I ask.
Go ahead.
My question is, in the meantime, can you find out 2 things for me?
Yes, sir.
Is that coral rock, and can the structure be moved?
Okay.
So have a structure.
I think you could help us out in making.
But I don't want to have a conflict of interest. Let him expend the money.
Yeah.
Get us an expert to say if we can move the house or not move it.
Okay.
And find out about the brick for me, please.
I'm pretty sure we could put it on steel I-beams and move it anywhere up and down.
I'm sure you can too, but I want an expert and an invoice
That's
saying
fine.
that
I
he
can
can do
get
it.
somebody that specializes, a specialization letter in that.
Okay, so does the commission agree that we can defer this and then allow me to work with the owner to come up with and satisfy the applicant and to be able to keep this house intact and still allow Mr. Cole to be able to build what he needs?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't agree with keeping
just
the
a
house.
few questions.
I'm sorry?
Well, I do have a few questions, only because, and I'm going to just be really honest here, this is a little bit off the rails now as far as I'm concerned in terms of our process, in terms of also then what others would expect when they come before us after they spend time at the Historic Preservation Board. Again, just as I said earlier in the day when we had the CRA item, is this how everyone's going to be treated going forward? Because I have an issue when we just treat someone differently than treating everybody else that might come before us. So I have a little bit of issue with that process. I'd like to ask the city attorney what he feels about this and what our charge is tonight. Again, if you're going to negotiate by yourself, where's the applicant? Where's the neighborhood? Where's everybody? I have to digest this a little bit because I really do believe it's a bit off the rails. City attorney?
Off the rails.
I concur with you.
Like we're doing something.
Oh, no, the process is off the rails. It's just not the way.
So what did you?
So just vote it down.
What would you want to do instead?
I mean,
Well, I want to hear from the city attorney. I want to know that if we do this, what you're suggesting, is this what we're going to do all the time?
Well, you're gonna make me earn my keep tonight. We are a little bit astray on the process, obviously. So the sole determination for you tonight, obviously, is whether it's historical or not. We can defer it, but we are running on the 180-day time limit, so it probably would have to be the next meeting if you are going to defer it, because then we're going to get into some time crunches there. The other aspect is we can certainly talk, and yes, it's not the typical process we go through, but a deferral has occurred before. There can be conversations. We do want to be careful with conversations with regards to Anne Murray, because we don't want this to become yes or no to designation based on something that's completely irrelevant to the application. Excuse me.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Please do not.
Excuse me.
Go ahead, Alan.
Talking to my client.
Okay, I get that.
So, because that we get into exaction territory there. So we're not going to start bargaining with other aspects that are not part of this application. So we have to be careful there. So if we do have conversations and we want to try to, we just can't base the designation on some kind of deal that is not related to whether it's historical or not. So that determination ultimately will have to be made, regardless of what sort of discussions you have at some point. If we do defer it to the next meeting, let's say, you will have to make a determination as to whether it's historical or not.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, I'm ready to vote on whether or not it's historic, and then have the conversations afterwards about how he's going to donate it to the city, and we're going to remove it and then put it somewhere else, but that's my opinion.
All right, so I can't make any motions, so if there's going to be a motion, it has to come from one of you four. So whatever you folks want to do, just what is the pleasure of this commission?
Well, so, District Commissioner, what is your pleasure here on this?
Yeah.
This is your district.
Yeah, appreciate it. So, Mayor, what I'm hearing you say is you'd like to defer it till the next commission meeting, and in that meantime,
There's no way it can fit on the next commission
Okay.
meeting. With everything that's already been deferred to the 21st, earliest we
really.
could get to this would be the morning of the 22nd likely. So I'm really more interested if you're going to do
120
that.
days permit us to go into
That's what we need to check, because January 5th would be the next agenda that would have any space on it. We just can't get to it on the 21st.
I won't be here.
And you're saying it's 180 days, Alan said the clock is, and when
So
did that start?
between our staff and the attorney's office, we need to decide if we have
So-
sufficient time.
So, Ben,
Yep.
what do you want to do?
What do you want to do?
You, not me. You.
Only if the applicant waives it.
appreciate it. So this will be helpful data, Alan?
I'm sorry, I was multitasking.
The 180
Yep,
days.
180 days.
What date-
The applicant-
What is our deadline in terms of meeting? Can we go into the first meeting or the second meeting of January?
I think that exceeds the 180. I don't know the exact calculation. January 1st meeting. Do we have the date certain?
When did the clock start?
Do we have the date certain? I think Tricia has the when the 180 ends.
The clock started August 27th, so I think,
September, October, November.
is that January 20-something? Date that a complete application is received.
What was the application date?
The complete application was received on August 27th.
August 27th.
What's 180 days from that?
So September, October,
Or
November,
it's-
December, January, February.
February,
27th or February.
more or less.
More or less. So we have into January.
August 27th was 102 days ago.
Right.
So we've got
It takes us into February.
February. Okay. So if city attorney's comfortable, city manager's comfortable with deferring to
The second meeting in January? Or
January 18, 2022? January 18,
That agenda could handle this topic.
2022? Okay, and Tricia, if our math is right, that's
I
permissible?
just did the math from August the 22nd, and if that's correct, 180 days is Friday, February 18th.
Okay. So I'm comfortable moving it to then. to make a determination. I mean, my preference is to make a call tonight and just finalize this. But Mayor, if you feel strongly about wanting to
It's up to the commission.
take time,
I feel that everything we do in this community should be done cooperatively and with as much shared interest and result as possible. I don't want us to be, butting heads. I don't want this gentleman to feel that the community is against him. If there's a motion on the floor to either deny or to designate this property, that's the prerogative of the commission. But I think that there's an opportunity here to work out a deal with Mr. Cole, and I'm offering myself up to try to work that out.
okay, and Alan, just so I'm tracking, if this is deferred to January 18, 2022, do we as a commission lose any rights, abilities, powers in determining whatever, is appropriate as we have tonight, the same ability to do the same on the 18th?
You don't lose any ability. It's going to be the same exact item, the same exact record, obviously with the addition of today and the evidence that you heard today.
Right.
You have already closed public hearing, so I presume unless you reopen it, that's going to stay closed.
Right.
So that would be one aspect of it.
Yep.
And then again, the determinations would have to be the same. It's yes or no on whether it's historical or not.
Great, and we can reject or agree or do something different, whatever the mayor comes with.
Yes, and it has to be, and I want to be careful that it has to be based on the evidence presented to you, not because gentleman doesn't want to do something that perhaps, let's say the deal is, move the house and he says no. I'm not saying you would say no, but just as an example, it can't be because you didn't agree to some part of a deal that we want to make. It has to be based on the evidence because then we'll get into problems.
Right.
Okay. And just for clarity, I think there are times when we've, had a couple so the mayor will be the lead on these discussions. The district commissioner will not be.
Unless you want to take the.
That's up to you.
I'm happy for you
Well,
to do
I
it,
think-
Mayor. I have full faith and confidence in your
I think though,
your abilities.
from a quasi,
That
because
can either be successful or not, and you can make a decision then.
Right.
it gets a little tricky because you are in a quasi-judicial situation. So it's kind of like going and having secret meetings with the judge, right? So we do want to be careful there. So I think to the extent there's any conversations, obviously Mr. McAloon will have to be involved. The applicant should probably be involved as well. And then I would probably recommend you can certainly meet with the district commissioner. It may be helpful to meet with each of you, or at least bring you up to speed, because if you designate someone, if the commission designates someone to actually do that, then that has to be in the sunshine. So you don't want to go through that inconvenience, right?
We can't have two commissioners attending the same meeting.
Correct. So I'm saying they should probably meet with you separately in that regard.
Right. But if I do meet with the property owner, we would include the applicant and yourself or someone from your office.
That would be preferable because you are in an open quasi-judicial process.
Right, okay.
So Mayor, I'd rather one of us take point on this and not have both of us. So I'm completely comfortable with you doing it, and I will not be engaged in this and just look forward to the results.
And just the commission will be prepared to vote one way or the other.
Correct. And in the meantime, also just, we were getting assurances from the property owner that there will be no change to the existing structure or land.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Okay, yeah, except for the raccoons,
Yeah,
the
so
wild.
as he's proffered on the record, no demolishing the structure. The only thing regarding the land is we did submit that application to Marine Advisory, which we pulled related to the docks. I don't want to reserve him from not going forward. I don't think he has plans right now.
I don't understand why.
But I just wanted to make that technical point.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Well, they don't have the authority to do a stop work order. No, that would have to come from staff.
Mayor,
So
I have a
we to
question
look
for
into
Alan.
that.
I have a question for Alan.
And before I get there, I just want to, if we are going to designate someone, we are going to have to notice that. So we could do it in the conference room upstairs, but it's something we'd have to publicly notice because, again, you're in an open quasi-judicial, so you don't want to have essentially a shade meeting because
The mayor has to notice his meetings with the property owner and the applicant.
Right.
Okay.
And well, no, with the public as well. So if somebody from the public
Right.
wants to sit in,
Yeah,
they can.
okay.
Alan, what does our ordinance say in terms of, I know that we've changed that this commission, if there is a property in process in terms of historic designation, there cannot be a permit applied for demolition, or there can't be anything that can happen during this process. But isn't there a time limit on that amount of days?
Oh, yes, there is.
What is that? I think we're in violation.
You're really testing me.
Well, I think we're going to be in violation of that because we're going to be outside the number of days that protects the property from anything happening at all while this consideration is taking place.
Right, so you're correct. There's a 90-day that
And
we're outside of. So
Yeah.
Mr. McAloon and the property owner would have to waive it and
Yeah, that's very
agree not
important.
to, yes.
Well,
Okay, I'm just making the record clear.
Right, right.
and that's, well, Mayor, I think any of us can bring up anything we'd like to bring up. I just want, no, you're missing the point. It's very important that everyone understands that there is a 90 days only where the property is protected by being in a process of historic designation.
Right, but the gentleman already said he would.
Well, I'm asking the city attorney if that is enough of a guarantee that we are waiving all of those rights and all of that information. You have to just indulge us once in a while, Mayor, if we have a question. Sorry.
I get that, but you're prolonging the debate by repeating things that are already resolved, and I'm just trying to point that out to you.
But that's a new point.
It is a new point. Thank you. It is a new point that I just wanted to reiterate and make sure that the Mr. Cole's word that he's waiving that is sufficient.
It is out on the record, and Mr. McAloon, I believe, agrees? Yes?
Perfect.
And if you'd like a stronger assurance in the form of an affidavit, I'd be happy.
No, I don't need it.
No,
You're-
I appreciate
you're enough
it.
served as enough served the court. You,
Exactly. I just wanted to make the same point.
Okay, so can I make a motion then? Yeah. I'd like to move that this is deferred to, we're going January 18th, 2022, with the mayor being the lead in discussions with applicant and property owner.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion regarding the motion? There being none, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Moritas?
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman?
No.
Commissioner McKenzie?
No.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis?
Yes. Motion's approved. The item's deferred to January 18th, 2022. Okay, moving on to the next item. Ordinance first reading, ordinance amending the non-bargaining unit classification table of the pay plan of the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida by revising the pay grade of 2 classifications. No one has signed up to speak. Anyone wish to speak on this? If not, would someone like to move, introduce the ordinance?
Introduced.
An ordinance of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, amending the classification table of the pay plan of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as amended by revising the pay grades of the 2 classifications and providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinance provisions, and an effective date. Vice Mayor Moritas?
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman?
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis?
Yes, and the ordinance is approved on first reading. OSR 1, this is ordinance of second reading, amending the non-bargaining unit classification table of the pay plan of the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida by creating 2 new classifications. No one has signed up to speak. Anyone have any questions? If not, would someone please introduce the ordinance?
Introduced.
It's been introduced. Please call the roll.
An ordinance of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, amending the classification table of the pay plan of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, as amended by creating and adding 2 classifications and providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinance provisions, and an effective date. Vice Mayor Moritas?
No.
Commissioner Glassman?
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis?
Yes. Why the no? Oh, the cultural affairs. Okay. All right. OSR 2, second reading, ordinance amending Schedule 6 of the pay plan of the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida by increasing the minimum salary of the pay ranges that are less than the state of Florida minimum wage effective September 30th, 2021. No one has signed up to speak. Any questions regarding this? There being none, please call the roll.
Someone introduce.
Introduced.
An ordinance of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, amending Section 6, Special Employees of the Pay Plan of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, by increasing the hourly minimum wage of certain pay ranges consistent with the state of Florida minimum wage, and providing for severability, repeal of conflicting ordinance provisions, and an effective date. Vice Mayor Moritas?
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman?
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Mayor Trentalis.
Yes, and the ordinance is now approved on second reading. Is there any further business of the City Commission?
Mr. Mayor, just before you adjourn the meeting, I want to mention that I didn't catch it, we didn't do the OPEB meeting this afternoon, so if we could adjourn the evening meeting and quickly do an OPEB meeting, there's 2 items on it. It's a quick investment report minutes, but we missed it this afternoon.
I thought we did it.
That was in the CRA, but this was an OPEB.
No, we did it.
We did it with the.
We didn't do OPEB. We did.
That was the
The
quarter.
financial
Not-
advisor?
Not in the OPEB context.
Oh, okay.
So we need to have an OPEB meeting to quickly tidy up 2 things, and then we'll be good to go.
Wait a minute. We had the meeting. I
We had a-
concluded the conference meeting and we went into the OPEB meeting.
No, we had a CRA meeting.
We also did that too. Susan Grant was up there and we talked about the investments.
There are 2 parts to the investments. So there is the investment of the city's funds, and then there's a separate subject matter just for OPEB. They touched on OPEB when we were talking about the market's performance in general, and a question was asked as to whether the rise in markets was good for the city's portfolio. And the investment advisor mentioned in passing that yes, it works well for the OPEB because that's invested in equities, whereas the city's surplus funds are not. But we did not have an OPEB meeting. You have to sit as the Board of Trustees and vote separately and distinctly for OPEB-related items.
And we can't vote at conference, got to vote here. Let's do
Okay.
it.
All right. The meeting's adjourned. We now begin our other post-employment benefits board meeting. Please call the roll.
Vice Chair Moritas? Commissioner Glassman?
Here.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Here.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Here.
Chair Trentalis.
Here. BR1, other post-employment benefits trust quarterly investment report for period ending September 30th, 2021. We heard the presentation. Is there anything else, any action needs to be taken on that? I don't think so.
It's not for action, no.
Okay, M1, motion approving the minutes for the September 21, 2021 other post-employment benefits trust board meeting. Any questions regarding that? Do I hear a motion to approve?
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Vice Chair Moritas?
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman?
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Chair Trentalis.
Yes, and that motion's approved. Is there any further business of the other post-employment benefits board?
There is not.
Okay, meeting concluded. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night.